Chapter 688. Automatons, as the name suggested, were animated objects and unnatural objects created by spellcasters. Since they were mostly made of hard materials such as stones and metals, they were often mistaken for robot monsters or stone monsters. However, the truth was that the materials used to construct the construct were not limited to hard substances. With the incredible power of the arcane arts, anything could be made into constructs, including flesh, clay, ropes, water, flames, and even air. Among them, the most powerful creation had incredible magic resistance, which was why it was also known as the magic statue. Generally speaking, they did not have the ability to think independently and were completely driven by the power of magic. They could understand simple commands and attack the enemy according to the several sets of programs set by the creator in advance, just like the non-intelligent robots in many movies. There is no doubt that Andre did not use the above methods to create the flesh automaton. To be exact, he did not know whether the thing he created could be called an automaton. First of all, the torso was not molded with any magic, nor was it added with any magic resistance. It was completely the cells on the arm that adjusted and divided on their own. There were no traces of human intervention at all, not to mention the word creation. To some extent, except for the fact that the huge demon in front of him did not have a soul, everything else was very normal. It should belong to the category of a vegetable or brain dead. Secondly, generally speaking, when spellcasters created automatons, they usually chose the relatively calm earth element or wind element. But in order to reduce the enchantment procedures and save time, Andre used the violent fire element. After all, he was the Flaming Duke and had natural control over the fire element. But in this way, the will of the fire element itself was not restricted in any way, which meant that the flesh automaton also had the ability to think independently. Although the elements themselves were very simple and could even be said to be dull, independence was independence, even if they themselves were not aware of it. Finally, Andre did not have the supreme rights of an ordinary creator to this flesh automaton. He relied on his identity as the Flaming Duke, which meant that if the Prince of Fire Element, Isoldezer, withdrew this power, he would immediately lose control of the automaton. Of course, the probability of this happening was negligible. At least, he did not have to worry too much about it for a few years. The reason why Andre had created such a freak was to fight against the two clay golems in Gerald Jenkinson's hands. After using it, he could do whatever he wanted with it. Feeling the immense power of the puppet, the corners of his mouth curled up. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly heard a series of violent knocks on the door behind him. Who? Andre subconsciously clenched his fists and asked in a low voice. Soon, a deep voice came through the door. Master Uhtred. Master just returned. He asked me to ask if you're free tonight. He wants to have dinner with you to discuss the recent situation in the city. Dinner? Andre was taken aback because he could tell that the guy standing outside the door was not human at all, but one of Gerald's golems. Yes, at 7:30 tonight. He will be waiting for your arrival in the central control room. The golem replied in a low, muffled voice without any emotion. Obviously, Andre could not refuse this invitation. After thinking for a few seconds, he immediately replied, Please help me inform your master that I will be there on time at 7:30 tonight. Understood. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation. Goodbye. With that, there was a slight tremor in the corridor. There was no need to ask to know that the golem must have left. As soon as the golem left, Carmen asked in a low voice, Are you sure you want to do it tonight? They're at most 4 hours before 7:30. Are you planning to take this big guy directly to the banquet? Andre glanced at the succubus behind him and smiled meaningfully. No, there's no need for that. The distance between this room and the central control room is definitely not more than 100 meters. In other words, a simple teleportation spell can solve all the problems. You and the puppet will stay here. If you need to do it, I will send you a signal in advance. Carmen felt that this plan was a bit risky. He frowned and reminded, Teleportation? Are you sure? You should know that the other party is the master of this mage tower. He can turn off all the teleportation spells in the tower at any time. Although your concern is very reasonable, logically speaking, Gerald will not turn off the teleportation function of the mage tower easily because it will cause unnecessary panic. With his cautious character, the probability of such a situation happening is not more than 5%. In other words, excluding all the unfavorable factors, the success rate of our action is far more than 50%. For an assassination, such a success rate is very high. It is worth the risk. There's only a fine line between recklessness and bravery. What we need to do is to find a balance between the two. I think 50% is a good balance. What do you think? As a social elite from Earth, Andre never lacked courage, nor did he lack decisiveness at critical moments. Once he thought that a plan had a high chance of success, he would not hesitate to carry it out. Carmen's character was just the opposite. The nature of a demon made her cunning and changeable. She rarely had the so-called persistence. Things like loyalty and moral integrity were even more like described in a black humor. They were bones without any meat and had been fed to dogs long ago. Seeing that she could not stop Andre's risky behavior, Carmen could only helplessly shrug her shoulders. Well, since you insist, then finish the last step of the spear as soon as possible. I will help you get through this difficult time. But there is one condition. After it is done, Gerald's soul must belong to me. Deal. I wish us a pleasant cooperation. Andre agreed to the succubus's condition without hesitation. Anyway, he was not one of those paladins who pursued justice and kindness, nor was he a follower of any god. As long as he could achieve his goal, he did not care what would happen to the enemy's soul. It would not be a problem even if it was made into one of the currencies of the lower plane, the soul crystal pillar. Haha, pleasant cooperation. Carmen smiled and licked her seductive red lips. Her eyes were shining with a terrifying evil light, as if she could not wait to taste the soul of a level 12 mage. Chapter 689. The human brain's perception of time was irrational. Usually, the more information one received per unit of time, the slower time would pass. The less information one received per unit of time, the faster time would pass. That was why people often said that busy time always passed quickly. During the busy time, people would always repeat one or several things and would not receive any new information at all. For the entire afternoon, Andre first attached the pure negative energy left behind by the Spirit King onto the surface of the spear in the form of engraving, completing the final enchantment of the weapon. Then, he engraved a one-time short-distance teleportation circle in the stomach of the huge flesh puppet. Just when he wanted to test the accuracy of the teleportation, Carmen, who had been standing at the side without saying a word, suddenly reminded him, "It's already 7:10. You'd better stop what you're doing immediately and clean up the bloodstains and stains on your body. Get ready for the banquet." What? Damn it. I haven't had the time to make a positioning and communication device. Andre raised his head and looked at the automatic hourglass hanging on the wall. He couldn't help but curse in a low voice. Aurère's method of time was almost the same as the one on Earth. There were 24 hours in a day and 365 days in a year. The only difference was that there were no clocks or watches in this world. Instead, they used corona, hourglass, and water clocks. Obviously, 20 minutes was not enough for him to make two magical items at the same time, even if the two magical items were as simple as they could be. It could even be said that there was no technical requirement. Don't worry, I've already made these two gadgets for you. Carmen pointed at the two gemstone buttons on the table. The red one is for positioning. You just have to wear it on your body. The blue one is for communication. If you need to use it, you just have to repeatedly rub the surface of the gemstone 3 times, and I'll receive the signal here. Andre was stunned for a moment. He quickly picked up the button and checked it. Immediately, he curled his lips in disdain. What a crude craftsmanship. 2 good gemstones have been wasted by you just like that. Oof. You're still being picky at this time. It's already good that you're still useful. Carmen rolled his eyes. Succubi were never a race that excelled in learning and patience. Even if they had free time, they would spend it on enjoying sex or plotting in the dark. Their innate magic basically relied on stimulating the power of their bloodline. Therefore, most of the strongest individuals among them had chosen the profession of warlock. Unfortunately, Carmen had yet to become a warlock. Otherwise, with her strength and knowledge, she would have become an elite succubus. Andre was too lazy to argue with an idiot in alchemy about the magic appearance of materials and magic capacity. He directly took off the clothes he had stolen from the smuggler's villa and began to rummage through Uhtred's wardrobe. After a short while, he changed into a dark black velvet robe. Without any hesitation, he removed the original button on the collar and replaced it with a ruby button. As for the other sapphire button, he fixed it on the inside of the wide sleeves of the robe. After doing all this, he tidied up his hair and beard. Afterwards, he turned around and asked, "How do I look?" Carmen sized him up and lightly nodded. "Not bad. Basically, you don't look any different from Uhtred. But you have to take note that Uhtred is left-handed. When he walks, he has a habit of walking with his left foot first. When he eats, he holds a knife in his left hand. Don't make any mistakes in this area. Also, your eyes are too sharp. It's best not to look at him directly. Gerald Jenkinson is a very cautious guy. Once you make him vigilant, then the difficulty and danger of our assassination will double. Don't worry, I'm a natural impersonator. Moreover, whether or not I make a move depends on the outcome of the negotiation. From a rational point of view, I'm actually more inclined to resolve our differences through cooperation." After saying that, Andre carefully took off the ring of the shifting beast on his hand, the secondary health amulet on his neck, and other magic items, so as to prevent these subtle flaws from being exposed. After repeatedly confirming that there were no problems, he took a deep breath. He directly pushed open the door and entered the passageway. Along the way, he constantly forced himself to become cold and serious. When he arrived at the entrance of the central control room, he had already adjusted himself to look exactly like the real Uhtred. "Welcome. Master has already prepared a sumptuous banquet. Please come in." The golem guarding the door bowed in a very human-like manner. It raised its arm and pushed open the heavy and thick door. Andre completely ignored the golem. He didn't even say a word of thanks. He stepped into the most central room of this secret mage tower. Indifference and disregard was Uhtred's attitude towards magic creations. As soon as he walked into the room that was emitting a strong white light, he saw a sorcerer who was about 50 years old. He was wearing a green silk robe and had long platinum hair. The sorcerer opened his arms and greeted with a laugh. "Ha, my dear friend, you've finally come. Please take a seat. You should know that I specially asked the cook to prepare your favorite squid tonight." Without a doubt, this guy was Gerald Jenkinson, a level 12 defense mage. He was also the actual controller of this mage tower. Just from a number of accessories he was wearing, it was enough to give most people a headache. Amulets, rings, earrings, nose studs, anklets, and even a headband on his hair were inlaid with several gems. There was no need to ask to know that they were magic items. Gerald was completely following the records in the book, wearing as many magic items as he could, especially the strange bracelet with 2 clay dolls hanging on his wrist. It was definitely a product left behind by the ancient magic civilization. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to shrink 2 huge clay golems and carry them around. A strong opponent, Andre silently defined in his heart. At the same time, he squeezed out a smile on his face. He put one hand on his chest and bowed. "Thank you for your hospitality. Then I won't be polite. Of course, please treat it like you're in your own room. Let's fill our stomachs first, and then we can talk about other issues. You should know that tasting delicious food is a very enjoyable thing. I won't talk about those annoying things when I'm enjoying it." After saying that, Gerald immediately clapped his hands. Soon, 6 young girls dressed in light gauze walked out a mirror with food that emitted a tempting aroma. They respectfully placed the plates on the table that had been prepared in advance. They had obviously been professionally trained. Whether it was their steps, posture, or the smiles on their faces, they were full of beauty. Coupled with the soothing harp playing, it gave people the illusion that they were in a dream. Chapter 690. After taking a seat, Andre listened to the melodious music while admiring the graceful movements of the girls as they served the dishes. He smiled and said to Gerald, "I didn't expect you to enjoy yourself so much. May I take the liberty to ask where these girls came from? Valen City can't train them to this level." Hee hee, your eyes are still as sharp as before. That's right, these girls were carefully selected from the crowd that the pirates plundered. Every one of them is a pure virgin from a famous noble family. They were sent to the Pearl of the Desert, Kamla, when they were 12 years old to receive perfect training. It took them a whole 4 years to reach the level where their every movement is full of beauty. But it's a pity that this beauty can only be maintained for a very short time. Once they start to age, even their most graceful movements can't hide the wrinkles on their skin. Perhaps it's just like what the Druids say, there are beautiful things in nature, but the longer they last, the shorter they are. Fortunately, we are all arcane magic users and can remove the parts that are no longer beautiful. Isn't that right? Gerald was like an artist, showing off his collection in a low-key manner. At the same time, he raised his cup and took a sip of mint tea. It was obvious that he was a mage who strictly abided by the rule of not drinking alcoholic beverages. He was so cautious that it was almost insane. It was as if he was wrapped in an invisible shell, and anyone who wanted to kill him would have to pry open this shell first. However, Andre had already prepared an opener, so he nodded calmly and said, "Yes, just like what a scholar once said, every mage is born to be a noble, but a noble born to be a mage doesn't necessarily have the potential to become a mage. We are born to be in a superior position, representing one of the most powerful forces in the world. We are completely capable of satisfying all our senses. But in my opinion, sensual enjoyment is far from the excitement and anticipation that comes from exploring magic, especially when you are about to step into the ranks of a great mage. How can you still be addicted to this?" Gerald put down the cup in his hand and didn't immediately respond. Instead, he let a young girl tie a white napkin around him and smiled meaningfully. "No, my dear Uhtred, you are too serious, too rigid, and too focused on magic research. You must know that we are first and foremost a human, and then a mage. Is there a problem with enjoying life? Of course not. Well, I invited you to dinner today, not to debate with you about the philosophy of dealing with people, and certainly not to discuss my style of living. Let's enjoy the beautiful music together and taste the delicacies that melt the tip of our tongues. We can talk about the rest after dinner." After saying that, he used his fork to pick up a piece of delicious and juicy fish steak, and then began to eat silently. Seeing that Gerald firmly grasped the initiative and refused to give him any chance, Andre could only sneer inwardly. He picked up the grilled squid in front of him and chewed slowly. In fact, he had only drunk a bowl of meat soup since the morning, and his stomach was already rumbling with hunger. However, for the sake of the upcoming battle, he still resisted the physiological desire and maintained an elegant eating posture to prevent the adverse effects of eating too much. In the process of eating, neither of them said a word, not even making eye contact. After a full 20 minutes, Gerald put down the knife and fork in satisfaction, wiped the sauce on his mouth with a napkin, and threw it aside. "It's really an intoxicating taste, isn't it? I hope that today's dishes can satisfy you. You must know that I have spent a lot of effort in this aspect. It would be a pity if the guest is not satisfied." "Of course, I am very satisfied. Thank you again for your invitation." Andre also put down the knife and fork and pretended to be satisfied. He had begun to get a little tired of this endless greeting and probing, and wanted to get to the point as soon as possible. Gerald seemed to have noticed something, and a strange look flashed in his eyes. He immediately raised his arm and waved his hand. The surrounding girls who served attentively bowed and retreated. Even the magic harp stopped playing automatically. Only 2 people and a table of leftovers were left in the big room. Watching the last girl disappear into the huge mirror, a strange smile suddenly appeared on Gerald's face. Then, without any warning, he muttered to himself, No, you are not Uhtred. Although you look very similar, there are still many subtle differences between you two. I was almost fooled." Hearing this sentence, Andre had goosebumps all over his body in an instant. He forced himself to be calm and retorted, "Why do you have this kind of illusion? I am me. Where is the difference?" No. It's useless to be stubborn. First of all, you're used to cutting things horizontally when eating, but the real Uhtred cuts things vertically. Second, although you notice that Uhtred is left-handed, you ignored this at the moment when you put down the cutlery and put down the fork in your right hand first. Lastly, and also the part that first aroused my suspicions, I've seen Uhtred wear this mage robe before, but the opening at the collar wasn't made of ruby. Can you explain why this opening is emitting a faint magical aura? In order to confirm this, I deliberately said that you like eating squid the most, but you didn't refute. You even ate a lot of it. You should know that Uhtred would never touch ingredients like squid. At this moment, Gerald finally showed the terrifying power hidden behind the smiling face and his amazing insight. Monster. A veritable monster. Andre now finally understood why Uhtred had infiltrated the Mage Tower for so many years, but he didn't dare to make a move. There was no other reason. It was this guy in front of him who didn't have the slightest flaw that firmly suppressed all the unstable factors. In front of him, all the plots and machinations would become useless, and even the slightest flaw would become very fatal. What was even more frightening was that he still had incomparable patience. He had noticed the problem from the beginning, and he endured it and used the 20 minutes of eating to repeatedly observe until he finally confirmed it. At this point, Andre understood that there was no need to continue pretending. He shook his head with a bitter smile and sighed. Wonderful observation and analysis. I didn't expect that after preparing so much, it still fell short of success. If I didn't guess wrong, you should have been blessing yourself with secret vision, right? Chapter 691. That's right. Your judgment is very accurate. In order to reduce the possible troubles, I must ensure that I am in an absolutely safe state. A pair of eyes that can see the magic items clearly can help me eliminate the danger in the bud. Don't be too depressed. You've done very well. If it weren't for that gem, I'm afraid I wouldn't have noticed these details. Gerald behaved like a mellow elder, guiding the conversation in an orderly and good manner. He didn't seem to be worried that Andre would suddenly attack him. He sat on the chair and talked with assurance. Of course, as a level 12 defensive mage who wore at least 7 magic items, Gerald had enough capital to ensure that he would not be hurt in any way. Moreover, he was the owner of this mage tower, so he could draw energy to form spells according to his needs at any time. Andre obviously knew this, so he didn't act rashly. He just touched the sapphire fixed in his cuff with his little finger and then deliberately shrugged his shoulders with a helpless look. I don't need your comfort. A loss is a loss. There's nothing to explain. Tell me, what are you going to do with me? Haha, no. I don't want to do anything to you at all. On the contrary, I want to have a good talk with you. But before that, you have to answer a few questions of mine. First, who are you? Or rather, which side do you represent? What's your purpose in sneaking into the Mage Tower? Second, where did Uhtred go? Since you dare to appear here openly, it means that you are certainly not afraid of being discovered. I need to know whether he is alive or dead. Thirdly, were you the one who killed Isidore last night? It had to be said that Gerald's reasoning was very clear, and the 3 questions were closely linked. If Andre answered according to the requirements, then Gerald would be able to get a lot of useful information from them. At this moment, he finally understood why there was a saying in this world, the only enemy of mages is themselves. Compared with most ignorant ordinary people, the IQ of mages was simply incredible. To be exact, they had surpassed the limits of the era and the development of productivity. They had evolved into a group of extremely special individuals. This kind of evolution was illogical. It was like during the Dark Middle Ages in Europe, a small group of people suddenly invented planes, cannons, and even rockets, and began to explore space and the universe. According to the truth that no knowledge or theory was born out of thin air, the existence and development of all things needed a foundation. The foundation of the modern industrial revolution on Earth was mathematics, physics, and chemistry. The invention and application of the steam engine and electricity were included in it. However, such a strange scene happened in Oriir. More than 70% of people had difficulty counting from 1 to 100, let alone learning to read. But mages were comparable to the most outstanding scientists, scholars, and politicians of the 21st century. Not only could they freely come and go in various planes with the power of Arcana, but they could also create artificial black holes, suns, and even life. It was as if they did not need any support at all, nor did they need any helpers. They could easily create miracles just by relying on the power of magic. Faced with such a combination of lunatics and perverts, how could a normal person have any room to resist? While the nobles of the nobles of the nobles, the nobles of the nobles of the world, to the nobles of the nobles of the world. While the kings of the world were celebrating the expansion of their territory, they had no idea that the mages had swallowed more than half of the huge amount of war dividends. As for the merchants, in order to get the items, scrolls, and potions made by the mages, they often did not hesitate to invest in them. Sometimes, they would even take the initiative to help the mages solve all their problems. This was an all-round crush from the spirit to the body, and then to the material world. If the gods had not joined forces to destroy the ancient magic civilization, the mages would have undoubtedly ruled the entire material world. Looking at Gerald sitting opposite him, Andre narrowed his eyes and began to hesitate whether to attack directly or to negotiate according to the original plan. Because Gerald was now vigilant, he was not very sure whether the assassination would work. After all, a prepared mage and an unprepared mage were two completely different concepts. Gerald seemed to have noticed something. The corners of his mouth rose slightly, and he suddenly raised his hand and snapped his fingers. In an instant, a white light visible to the naked eye fell from the sky and heavily wrapped Andre. The pure magic energy dispelled the effect of the transformation spell. In just a few seconds, he lost the appearance of Uhtred and changed back to his original appearance. Wow, you're surprisingly young. It seems that you're the young mage who killed Isidore last night. Can you tell me where Angus went? Gerald asked in a playful tone, stroking the beard on his chin. Andre's face turned pale. He never thought that Gerald would play such a trick without warning and directly force him into a dead end. There was no doubt that Gerald had just used the power of the Wizard Tower to dispel the transformation spell, and he had confirmed a lot of things through his figure and appearance. At present, Andre only had two choices. He could either launch an assassination to reverse the unfavorable situation in one fell swoop, or he could continue the negotiation at the risk of exposing his plan. Either way, it was not good. Just when he was about to say something, a short and hurried noise suddenly sounded in the Wizard Tower. Then the golem guarding outside the door said, "Master, a strong magic wave has been detected in the lower city. Judging from the energy intensity, it is at least a level 3 spell. Do you want to send someone to the site of the incident?" A level 3 spell. Gerald was stunned for a moment. He raised his head and stared at Andre with sharp eyes, as if he wanted to find something from his eyes. But unfortunately, the two looked at each other for a full minute and did not find any suspicious behavior. Perhaps because of the interference, Gerald did not notice that Andre had quietly put on the ring of the shifting beast. At the same time, he gently touched the gem hidden inside the cuff. Including this time, it was the third time that he had touched the gem used to send signals. The succubus in the other room immediately received the signal. She stuck out her pink tongue and licked the spear in her hand. She muttered to herself, "Great! I can't wait to taste the soul of a level 12 mage. I believe it must be very delicious." Chapter 692. Before little Alfred could figure out what was going on, the silver rune lines on the chest of the giant flesh puppet suddenly lit up. In just a few seconds, the huge figure began to become more and more blurred, and Carmen, who was standing behind it, also dissipated into the air little by little. Oh, my God! Is this also the power of magic? It can make such a big monster disappear without a trace. Although the boy's understanding of the world had been greatly impacted since he met Andre for the first time yesterday, the scene just now still made him a little unable to believe his eyes. The little succubus seemed to be affected by the magic energy. She burst into tears, and her delicate limbs desperately tore the clothes wrapped around her body. Damn it! Could it be that he was hungry? I don't have any milk for you now. Alfred, who came back to his senses, hurriedly picked up the little girl and coaxed her. He did not notice that the little succubus's eyes flashed with a trace of imperceptible playfulness and cunning. At the same time, in the central control room of the Mage Tower, Gerald was trying to use prophecy magic to show the image of the scene of the incident in the mirror. However, he failed several times. The opponent obviously interfered with the accuracy of the spell, and only a white mist appeared in the mirror. Don't waste your energy. Unless you specialize in divination or use an even more advanced arcana technique, you won't be able to do anything even if you try 100 more times, Andre mocked with a cold smile. Obviously, he was deliberately attracting the opponent's attention to make the final preparations for the upcoming assassination. You're the one behind the whole thing, aren't you? Gerald narrowed his eyes, and his tone was full of probing and suspicion. He knew very well that this secret mage tower was very simple and did not have any anti-interference ability. If he wanted to know the truth, there was no other way except to go to the scene of the incident. However, going to the scene of the incident required him to bear the corresponding risks. As a cautious mage, he would not take the risk unless he was clear about the situation, especially since an expert in battle like Isidore had died an unnatural death last night. Anyone with a brain would subconsciously be on high alert. Andre could already feel the slight vibration caused by the teleportation magic in the air. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he took out 2 magic books from his waist bag and threw them on the table. I think you should recognize them, right? Isidore and Uhtred's magic books. After seeing the 2 completely different patterns on the pages, Gerald's pupils shrank instantly, and his eyes were full of horror. Although he had already guessed the truth of the matter, when the evidence was in front of him, he could not help but exclaim loudly. Someone said that a dagger represented a mage's last dignity, while a magic book represented a mage's everything. If a mage's spellbook appeared in another person's hands, then there was only one explanation, and that was that the mage had been killed. Otherwise, as long as he was still breathing, he would not allow anyone to touch his spellbook, because that meant that he would allow others to pry into his inner world. That's right. I killed them, just as you speculated. Now, let me explain you why I killed them. Finding that all of Gerald's attention was attracted, Andre's eyes flashed with a trace of imperceptible playfulness, and then he tapped Uhtred's magic book with his finger. The reason why this guy died was because he tried to infringe on the power that should have belonged to me. Think about it. If in this mage tower, someone played tricks and tried to replace your position, what would you do? So he died, killed by my own hands. So, you are the leader of the huge intelligence network behind Uhtred? Gerald immediately asked. He was very smart and instantly interpreted the subtext in Gerald's words. Andre neither admitted nor denied it. He just smiled and tapped another book with his finger and continued to say, the reason why this guy died was because he was looking for death. If he didn't appear in the wrong place at the wrong time and take the wrong hostile action, I wouldn't have had to kill him. In my opinion, there is no love without reason in this world, and there is no hatred without reason. There must be sufficient reason for a person to kill another person, whether it is for survival or for benefits, or to vent the suppressed emotions in one's heart. I loathe meaningless killing, and I loathe a society that lacks order even more. The Sardinia Islands have been in chaos under the rule of pirates for too long. It is like a greedy leech, greedily lying on the blood vessels of many cities in the south, but it can't create any value. This situation must be changed, and the change must start from purging the original vested interests. So I personally pushed the entire Valence city into the abyss, intending to use blood and fire to cast a new order. To some extent, there is no direct conflict between you and me. I disguised myself as Uhtred this time, mainly to ask if you are willing to change partners. After the matter is done, not only will I guarantee all the rights that the Mage Tower currently has, but I will also make it more perfect and reasonable. After hearing these words, Gerald fell into a short silence. He didn't expect that the young man in front of him would actually speak of his plan so openly, and even take the initiative to invite him. Admittedly, as a mage, he didn't have any favorable impression of the pirates, and the cooperation between the two sides was only to make use of each other. But after cooperating for so long, they already had a very strong tacit understanding, and he wasn't very willing to take the risk of changing partners. After all, it was much easier to make a group of idiots act according to their wishes than to make a smart person act according to their wishes. After considering it over and over again, Gerald raised his head, his two deep blue eyes releasing a faint light like gems. After half a minute, he shook his head lightly. "I'm very sorry. I can't give you a definite answer, and I can't let you continue to return to the city and stir up a reign of terror. But out of respect for an outstanding mage, if you're willing to give up resistance, I can guarantee your safety." "Is that so? That's really regrettable. I'm also very sorry, because what's going to happen next can be called a disaster for both you and me." After saying this, Andre slowly stood up, his whole body starting to surge with violent energy. Chapter 693. I sincerely advise you to give up resistance because it's meaningless. The Mage Tower is the home, sanctuary, research center, and fortress of mages. The energy it stores is enough to put any legendary mage to shame. Although I'm not the builder of this Mage Tower, I have the highest authority. You have no chance of winning at all. Gerald didn't care about Andre's hostile behavior. Instead, he began to persuade him to surrender very seriously. In his view, the young man in front of him was a typical example of an ignorant person. If it weren't for the fact that he was a little afraid of the huge power vaguely shown by the Shadow Net, he would have already taken him down and imprisoned him in the anti-magic dungeon. Andre was laughing, and it was a very strange laugh. That was because he had already seen a huge and blurry image appear behind the Mage Tower. Just as he had expected, the teleportation magic in the Mage Tower was not sealed. In a few seconds at most, the big gift that he had carefully prepared would arrive on time. Just when Gerald was about to take warning measures, he suddenly felt a violent spatial vibration. Before he had time to look back, the whole room began to shake violently. Then, a giant flesh puppet with the appearance of a glyph demon fell from the sky and smashed a big hole in the ground. Horror! As this shocking scene appeared in the central control room of the Mage Tower, Gerald could no longer maintain his original demeanor and calmness. His eyes showed unconcealable fear. As an advanced mage, he recognized the appearance of the glyph demon at a glance and knew how terrible the destructive power of such a great demon was. Without saying a word, he drew energy and tried to expel it from the material world. But unfortunately, after a dazzling arcane light flashed, the huge glyph demon still stood in place, showing no signs of being expelled. How is this possible? Seeing that the spell didn't work at all, Gerald immediately let out a cry of surprise with his mouth agape. Hee, why is it impossible? You know, for a mage, nothing in the world is impossible. Although I'm very sorry, I still have to inform you that in this drama that is about to enter the climax, you have to leave early. After that, he suddenly raised his hand and snapped his fingers without warning. In an instant, a dazzling white light shot out from his palm, making Gerald temporarily unable to see anything. Although he couldn't see anything with his eyes, he didn't sit still and wait for death. He quickly released 2 clay golems from the bracelet in front of him, and at the same time tried to activate the magic items on his body one by one to enhance his defense. Andre obviously wasn't going to let the enemy have their way. He cast Magic Missile in the shortest time possible, and the energy bullet that emitted a faint glow drew a beautiful arc in the air. At the same time, he shouted attack. Obviously, Gerald was very experienced in fighting. He could tell the type of the spell just by the first few words of the spell. Without any hesitation, he activated the level 6 spell, Accident, which was set in advance. In the blink of an eye, a translucent spherical membrane enveloped him from head to toe. The 5 magic missiles crashed into it, and disappeared without even a splash. There was no doubt that he used accident to chain the level 4 spell, inferior spell nullification enchantment. The function of the former was to set conditions, such as being attacked by magic. Once the conditions were met, the chain of spells would be automatically released. The effect of inferior spell nullification enchantment was to prevent the effects of level 1 to level 3 spells, so the magic missiles naturally didn't have any effect. However, Andre didn't expect this kind of low-level spell to hurt Gerald. It was just to buy him some time. The real killing move was yet to come. After receiving the order to attack, the huge flesh and blood puppet dashed forward like a speeding tank. With a bang, it knocked the 2 clay golems away and wrestled with them, making them unable to stay close to protect Gerald. The sounds of the 3 gigantic creatures clashing against each other completely messed up their hearing. Taking advantage of the fact that the enemy's vision had not recovered, Carmen, who had been waiting for a long time, raised a spear and charged forward, initiating the assassination that he had been planning for a long time. The tip of the spear, which was shining with silver-gray light, passed through the inferior spell nullification enchantment in the blink of an eye. At the moment when the spear was about to touch Gerald's skin, Gerald seemed to feel the danger and immediately activated the magic stored in one of the rings. The succubus was surprised to find that she seemed to be blocked by an invisible field and could no longer move forward. There was even a faint force that was pushing her back. Damn it, that's a level 6 spell, repulsion. Quickly throw the weapon in your hand. Quick! Andre recognized the type and name of the spell at a glance and shouted anxiously. Although more and more arcane spells disappeared completely after the fall of the great magic civilization, and many of them were monopolized by spellcasters' organizations scattered all over the world, the records and descriptions about them didn't disappear. Repulsion, as the name suggested, was to make the opponent unable to get close to you. Few mages were willing to use it. After all, not letting others get close to you didn't mean that others couldn't attack you. As long as you threw the weapon in your hand, it could cause great damage to the caster. Carmen, who was reminded, threw the spear in his hand like a dart without hesitation. Under the huge inertia, the spear cut through the air like a thunderbolt falling from the sky. Even if Gerald couldn't see at this moment, he instinctively felt that death was approaching him. He knew very well that there was no time to activate the defensive magic now. He could only desperately turn his body sideways to reduce the cross-sectional area as much as possible so as to reduce the probability of being hit. In a split second, the magic-piercing spear easily destroyed the repulsion and pierced into his body. Along with a blood-curdling scream, Gerald was lifted into the air by the great inertia and then fell to the ground fiercely. Blood immediately flowed out of his wounds. Due to his timely reaction, the spear pierced into the side of his body. It seemed that his intestines and one of his kidneys were also injured. If this was an ordinary weapon, then he probably wouldn't die. But unfortunately, this was not an ordinary spear. In less than a second after hitting the target, the terrifying negative energy quickly invaded Gerald's body. Gerald only felt that his body was getting colder and colder, and he was getting more and more out of control. At first, he could see a little outline with his eyes, but it immediately became dark again. Chapter 694. Andre stared at Gerald, who was twitching on the ground, foaming at the mouth, and whose face had turned black. It was hard to tell whether Gerald was dead or alive. Finally, Andre understood why in the books written by many sorcerers, every time they mentioned anti-magic weapons, they would curse the sorcerers who created anti-magic weapons, calling them traitors of the sorcerer's world. The reason was simple. The anti-magic weapons could directly break through many defensive spells and were too dangerous for the mages. If they were not careful, they would be killed directly without any chance to retaliate. Just look at this magic-piercing spear, which had yet to be named. This was the first time it was used in a battle, and it had already caused irreparable damage to a level 12 defensive mage. He could not even think properly now, or else he would have already activated the other magic items. A perfect assassination, isn't it? Carmen slightly moved her wrist, which was used too much force, and smiled while licking her seductive red lips. Her eyes were shining, and she couldn't wait to enjoy Gerald's soul. Perfect, Andre sneered and glanced at the succubus. No, this is far from perfect. To be more precise, this is a failed assassination. My identity was exposed from the moment we met. If not for the fact that we were sufficiently prepared in advance, and the opponent was too careless, the ones who would be dead now would be us. As someone who had experienced Gerald's power in person, he knew very well what kind of opponent Gerald was. Maybe if he had used a couple of prophecy spells in advance, the result would have been the opposite of what he expected. The most powerful thing about the mages was that they could divine and predict something that would happen in the future and find a way to defeat the enemy from a few vague fragments. In the eyes of the mages, there was no such thing as perfection. Even if there was no mistake in the plan, once it was detected in advance, it would immediately be full of loopholes. Unfortunately, maybe because Gerald was too conceited, he did not pay much attention to this dinner and did not perform any divination. Otherwise, he would definitely have foreseen the assassination in advance. Although Andre was not a perfectionist, he could not bear to leave his fate to luck or the enemy's mistakes. After this lesson, he decided to find some time to refine his spellbook. At least, he had to supplement the prophecy spells. Every time he planned to carry out a plan in the future, he would take Gerald's current situation as a warning and never make the same mistake of underestimating the enemy. You're too serious. You have to know that this world is always full of all kinds of uncertain factors. According to the point of view of us demons, the entire universe is built on a foundation of chaos. You can't guarantee that there won't be any accidents, so the process is not important. What's important is the result. After saying that, Carmen shrugged indifferently, pounced on Gerald, opened his mouth, and gave him a kiss of death. In an instant, the kiss that was full of desire and hints was quickly transmitted to his brain through his nerves, completely destroying his last trace of consciousness. Even when he was seriously injured, his lower body was still erect, like a normal man who was being teased. As the last trace of life was sucked out of the body, the milky white soul began to slowly leave the body, floating in the air in the form of pure energy. The succubus did not give Gerald any time to react. She quickly took out the crystal column that she had prepared in advance and directly stuffed him into it without saying a word. Then, she used the unique spell of the demons to seal it. In just a few seconds, a soul crystal column that could be used in the lower city was completed. Looking at the struggling soul in the cylindrical crystal column that was 1 finger long and 2 fingers wide, the eyes of the succubus shot out a horrifying evil light. She stuck out her tongue and licked the soul greedily, and from time to time, a faint moan came out of her mouth. Her ugly behavior was simply outrageous. Andre could not stand it anymore. He immediately frowned and scolded. Enough. The battle is not over yet. I'll give you 3 minutes to figure out how to seize control of this wizard tower as soon as possible. He was very clear that killing Gerald was only the first half of the plan. The flesh puppet was still fighting with the 2 clay golems. Without a suitable weapon, it could not cause any effective damage to the golems at all. It could only barely stall for time. More importantly, there were at least 3 to 4 golems outside the central control room. If they accidentally discovered what was happening inside, then the defense mechanism of the entire wizard tower would be activated. At that time, they would not be able to escape even if they wanted to. No problem. I can give you a satisfactory answer in at most 1 minute. With that, Carmen stretched out his finger and gently tapped on the soul crystal column, followed by a pulling action. A part of Gerald's soul seemed to be pulled by some invisible force and was cruelly torn apart. He opened his mouth and desperately wanted to scream, wail, but he could not make any sound. Just by looking at his expression, one could tell that he was experiencing extreme pain at the moment. After doing all this, the succubus put the crystal column on her forehead and seemed to be communicating. After only half a minute, she turned her head and pointed to the waste bag on the corpse. There are 2 runestones inside. One of them is green, and the other is blue. Insert the 2 runestones into the groove hidden behind the mural. and you can gain control. Remember, the green one is on the left, and the blue one is on the right. Without any hesitation, Andre tore off the bloodstained waste bag and quickly found 2 runestones the size of a baby's fist. There was only one mural in the control room, so he carefully groped around for a while and immediately found the mechanism hidden on the upper side of the frame. Accompanied by the sound of grinding gears, the core of the mage tower was finally exposed. According to the instructions given by Carmen, Andre quickly inserted the 2 runestones into the designated position. In an instant, the 2 runestones burst out with dazzling light beams, respectively shooting into his 2 eyes. All the mechanisms, traps, operating methods, weaknesses, secret doors, and even the control of the 4 golems of this hidden wizard tower were all instilled into his mind in a very short time. At the same time, a large amount of spell structure models and magic knowledge were instilled into his mind. Andre only felt like his brain was about to explode. The blood in his body flowed more than twice as fast. His heart was like a speeding engine, thumping nonstop. His nose, the corners of his eyes, mouth, and ears began to bleed uncontrollably. His whole person looked abnormally ferocious. Chapter 695. Damn it, damn it, damn it. What have you done, you lowly maggot? Such a horrifying and strange scene made Carmen furious. He cursed loudly at the soul in the crystal pillar and kept torturing Gerald with spells. No matter how Gerald tried to explain or beg, Carmen didn't stop at all. Although the succubus did not care about the life or death of others, according to the content of the magic contract, if something happened to Andre, she would not be able to continue to live freely in the material world. Demons were known for their capriciousness and madness. After they became angry, they became even more aggressive. In just a few minutes, they tore Gerald apart and reorganized him again. After repeating this several times, his soul began to show an indescribable distortion and sickness. Anyone with a little common sense would know that this was the precursor of depravity. Demons were not devils. They liked to use relatively gentle ways to lure mortals into depravity. They preferred to use direct and violent means. Any soul that fell into their hands, even if it was the purest paladin in life, would inevitably be depraved in the end. The only difference was the length of time. Obviously, Gerald was very smart, but he was not strong in terms of willpower. He would rather be depraved and become one of the demons than suffer terrible torture. Perhaps it was because of the weak nature of mortals that the demons were constantly replenished. Even if they were constantly killing each other, their numbers were still increasing. Whether it was their mortal enemies, the devils, or the heavenly creatures from the upper planes, they had no good way to deal with them. They could only try their best to trap them in the bottomless abyss. However, all this had nothing to do with Andre, because he could no longer perceive the existence of the outside world. He was deep in the spiritual world and could not extricate himself. The familiar room, the familiar furnishings, and the familiar smell. Everything seemed to return to the night of thunder and lightning 4 years ago. Although it had been so long, Andre still recognized his room at a glance. To be exact, it was his house on Earth before he crossed over. He did not understand why he appeared here, nor did he understand what it meant. Suddenly, outside the window, a dazzling flash of lightning flashed, followed by the sound of thunder. The rumbling sound was endless, and the terrifying lightning storm tore apart the sky, carving its own traces on the ground. They were like dangerous and naughty children, recklessly destroying everything they touched. Cars, streetlights, asphalt roads, and even skyscrapers. Everything was turned into ruins in just a few minutes. The civilization built by human wisdom was so fragile in the face of the supreme power of nature. It was a scene of doomsday. Andre stood in place, silently admiring the arrival of the catastrophe. He realized that there was no one on the streets. Not to mention the streets, even the collapsed buildings didn't have anything alive. It was like a dead city. What the hell is going on? Why am I seeing this in the deepest part of my consciousness? Could it be that when I left Earth, I caused the destruction of an entire city? As he racked his brain to think of various possibilities, he tried to get his consciousness to leave and return to his body. But unfortunately, this room was like the sturdiest cage. No matter what method he used, there was no way to leave. The broken glass would be restored to its original state in just a second. When he opened the door and walked out, he would be back in a room in the blink of an eye. Everything seemed to have fallen into an infinite loop with no end. Just as Andre began to feel annoyed, a huge eye appeared in the sky outside the window. Before he could even react, the strange voice in the dream echoed in his mind again. Energy has been replenished to the minimum call. Call my name. I am your guide. I am your assistant. Or your eyes. I woke up from a deep sleep. Call my name. I will give you strength, wisdom, and knowledge. Shout out loud. With the repetition, Andre's mind slowly became absent-minded. His eyes lost focus, and the memories hidden in the deepest part of his mind began to replay like a movie. Childhood, adolescence, youth, adulthood. The longer he watched, the more he found that his life seemed to be dominated by some unknown force. Every time he encountered danger or major setbacks, someone would immediately stand up to help him. Some of them even didn't consider their own safety at all. It was simply abnormal to the extreme. In the midst of his confusion, Andre seemed to understand something. He lowered his head to look at the tattoo on the back of his left hand and muttered to himself, "So it was you. You brought me into this world. You have been secretly helping me. Then what are you?" That's right. To be exact, I used the purest magic energy to give birth to you. As for my name, think about it carefully. I have engraved it in the depths of your memory since you were born. The big eye quickly expressed its thoughts clearly through the power of the mind. It seemed to be a little impatient, and its tone was full of urging. Andre nodded thoughtfully and closed his eyes to continue wandering in the sea of memories. He did not know how long had passed. Perhaps it was a second, perhaps it was a year. Anyway, in the world of the mind, time was meaningless. Finally, he slowly opened his eyes and opened his mouth to say a word, the Eye of Arcane. As the word blurted out, the whole spiritual world began to shake violently, especially the eye-shaped tattoo on his hand that was blooming with dazzling light. The big eye seemed to have heard the most beautiful sound in the world. It laughed and replied, "That's right. The Eye of Arcane. It is my name. Come on, hug me. Hug the greatest masterpiece of the magic empire." After that, it instantly shot a purple light into Andre's left eye. The intense pain swept through his brain in less than a second. Andre could not help but let out a painful scream. Then, the spiritual world began to collapse rapidly. Everything was broken, showing a scene of intertwined emptiness and chaos. The next second, the tattoo on his left hand completely disappeared, and his consciousness was pulled back to his body by a powerful force. At the moment when his consciousness merged with his body, an indescribable force burst out from his left eye. The violent energy swept through the central control room in the form of a shockwave. The two clay golems that faithfully carried out the last order of their creator were directly disintegrated into countless tiny particles that floated quietly in the air, while the flesh golems next to them were unscathed. Chapter 696. Carmen didn't know what words to use to describe the horrifying scene in front of her. Golems were the most outstanding creations among the constructs. Each of them had unparalleled magic resistance, and the best of them could even resist a 9th-level spell head-on. The clay golems happened to be the one with the lowest resistance to force and the highest resistance to magic. But now, they were directly disintegrated into fine particles by an unknown force. Even with the succubus's sensitivity to supernatural forces, she didn't feel anything unusual at all, as if the particles floating in the air were an illusion. She couldn't believe what would have happened if that shock wave had hit her. Perhaps she would have been disintegrated into small pieces like the clay golems. Just thinking about it made her scalp tingle. Terrifying. Too terrifying. A chill quickly surged from the depths of her heart, and Carmen's body began to tremble uncontrollably. This was fear from the depths of her soul. Fear of the unknown. fear of power, fear of death. As the energy completely dissipated in the air, the two glowing runestones suddenly dimmed. Then, a large number of cracks appeared on the surface of the runestones. After a few seconds, the runestones exploded into dust and scattered in all directions. Andre, whose face was covered in blood, regained control of his body. He endured the pain and slowly climbed up from the ground. He could feel his brain was dizzy and swollen, and a large amount of information was forcibly instilled into him. At the same time, he had also become the supreme master of this wizard tower. With just a thought, he could immediately transfer the energy stored in the tower and form a spell structure according to his will. There was no doubt that the two runestones were not ordinary. They were not only the key to the highest control of the wizard tower, but also the storage of all the magic knowledge in the valve. Although he didn't know who the author was, one thing was certain, and that was that the level of the wizard was definitely not inferior to the Wizard Boris of the Wizard Association in Lincoln City. It was very likely that the material alone was an astronomical figure, and now it was all for Andre. Just as he was about to wipe away the blood that was blocking his vision, Carmen suddenly let out an ear-piercing scream. She stretched out a trembling finger and shouted, Your eyes? My eyes? Andre subconsciously turned his head and glanced at the mirror behind him. Oh, damn it. Everything that happened in the spiritual world just now was actually real. In the mirror, his left eye was no longer silver like his right eye. Instead, it was a beautiful violet. In the middle of his pupil, there were a few golden rings that kept spinning. They were of different sizes, and they seemed to be revealing some kind of mystery from the universe. The shocked Carmen obviously noticed this and immediately spat out a mouthful of blood as if he had received a huge mental blow. He muttered to himself in a daze, Everything is connected. Everything is connected. Everything is a ring? What do you mean? Seeing that the succubus was becoming more and more dispirited, as if she could die at any moment, Andre immediately approached her, grabbed her shoulders, and shook her vigorously. Hee hee, ha ha. Everything is a ring, the truth of the entire multiverse. It was the form of the universe's existence. The endless planes existed in the gaps between the intersecting rings. You're a ring. I'm a ring. We're all rings. Carmen seemed to have gone mad. Not only was she spouting nonsense, but she was also dancing around. Her eyes had completely lost focus, and she did not even react when her most beloved soul crystal fell to the ground. Arcane eye? Everything is a ring? Bastard. Who can explain to me what the F***CK is going on? Andre, who had no idea what was going on, could no longer keep calm. He clenched his teeth and cursed. Everything had happened too quickly and too suddenly. He did not have any time to think. In addition, the forced infusion of knowledge had caused his head to feel dizzy, and he could not concentrate at all. However, before he could finish cursing, a violent energy fluctuation suddenly surged in the room. A few seconds later, a person in a blue cloak appeared in the room. He had a slender and thin body, and a face that was handsome enough to make any woman jealous. His long brown hair covered his pointy ears, and one could vaguely see the outline of his face. Obviously, this was none other than the half-elf mage, Orlando Watts, who had been hiding in the dark all this time to monitor everything. Andre was acutely aware of the astonishing magical energy in the person's body. He immediately took a few steps back and asked in a cautious tone, Who are you? What do you want? There's no need to be so nervous. Relax, I'm not your enemy. As for my identity, I'm very sorry. It's not convenient for me to reveal it at the moment. I was attracted by that strange eye of yours. The energy it released just now was too shocking. It was like the purest primordial magic, full of infinite possibilities. As Orlando spoke, he carefully observed the spinning golden ring in his left eye. He really didn't dare to approach it rashly, because, judging from the intensity of the energy detected just now, even if he was hit by the shockwave, it would be very difficult for him to survive. Although the half-elf did not show any hostility, Andre did not dare to relax. There is no need to say more about the terror of a quasi-legendary mage. Even the protection that was unintentionally formed around him was enough to make him feel suffocated. It was an absolute power that could not be resisted at all. But for some reason, he was not afraid. The two of them looked at each other like this for a full 5 minutes. Suddenly, a thoughtful expression appeared on Orlando's handsome face, and he said, "What an enchanting eye. Although I'm not too sure why it appeared on your body, and I'm not sure what kind of power it contains, it does reveal the truth of the multiverse. Everything is a circle." "Can you explain what everything is a circle means?" Andre asked with a frown. The half-elf mage nodded with a smile. "Haha, of course. Just like the literal meaning, the world we live in, the various planes, and even the entire multiverse exist in the form of a circle. You can understand it as a membrane or a fence. A big ring encircles a small one, and there are smaller rings in the gaps between the rings. It isolates all the planes and does not interfere with each other. The more powerful an individual is, the more difficult it is to cross the fence. If us mages want to travel to other worlds, we have to first flatten ourselves and then cross the cracks in the fence. You'll slowly understand when you start to travel around." Chapter 697. Is this the meaning of everything is a cycle? It sounds interesting. Andre was suddenly enlightened, and there was a trace of yearning in his eyes. At the same time, he also understood that the universe in this world was completely different from Earth. To be exact, he had no concept of the so-called multiverse before this, and the descriptions in books were pitifully few. Usually, it was just a sentence. "That's right, it's indeed very interesting, but I don't recommend that you explore this area too early, because it's too dangerous. Compared to the endless universe, humans are just too insignificant. Demons, devils, heavenly creatures, dragons, and other powerful species that are rarely seen on the Oleo continent are as numerous as the hairs on a cow. Of course, another reason is that if you don't have enough knowledge, once you accidentally pry into the mysteries of the universe, you will immediately become like that poor succubus." With that said, Orlando glanced at the crazy Carmen with pity. The so-called mysteries of the universe were not something that anyone could pry into and gain power from. Once one's knowledge exceeded one's own, one would immediately be overwhelmed by the terrifying scene and become a vegetable or a lunatic. Similar situations were recorded in many books. "You mean she will never be able to recover?" Andre frowned and asked. The half-elf archmage laughed and teased. "Why? Do you still think she can return to normal? Perhaps for those demons who have been to the center of the multiverse, there is still a little hope. But unfortunately, her spiritual world has completely collapsed, and even her soul has been contaminated. Perhaps death is the best ending for her. Otherwise, she will only continue to be crazy until the day of her death. Your eye is very dangerous, and it can even be said that it is very scary. Anyone who looks at it will definitely suffer a strong spiritual impact. If you can't understand that everything is a cycle, you will instantly become an idiot or a lunatic. So I sincerely suggest you to cover it up, unless you plan to kill everyone you see." Feeling the energy ring that was constantly released from his left eye to the outside world, Andre knew that the other party was not joking. He quickly took out the captain's eye patch and put it on. Then, he carefully probed. "Who are you? Why do you know so much?" "All right, it seems like you won't be satisfied if I don't give you a hint. To put it simply, I'm the supervisor of this game. I'm here to ensure that no one disturbs you throughout the game. At the same time, I'm also your protector. My mentor has asked me to ensure your safety." Without figuring out what the eye was, Orlando did not want to create a potential enemy for himself because of a misunderstanding. Thus, he told a part of the truth generously. As a great wizard who had traveled through countless planes, he knew very well that there were many dangerous and frightening things hidden in the world. Even the gods could meet with misfortune if they encountered them. He had to deal with everything before him carefully. Game. At the mention of this word, Andre immediately recalled the terrifying face of the Lich. He immediately raised his head and exclaimed, "You're its apprentice? You're Orlando Watts." He would never forget the words the Lich had said. especially the sentence, after the great calamity, "I only have 2 true apprentices." Coupled with the 2 pointy ears, it was not difficult to guess the identity of the lich. "Huh, it's just as my mentor said. You're very smart and very sharp. You're a genius through and through." "That's right, I'm Orlando Watts. Also, I have to remind you that when addressing my mentor, it's best to use he and not it. After all, when facing a powerful forerunner, we have to maintain our respect, don't we?" The half-elf laughed as she blinked her eyes playfully. Perhaps due to the influence of his elven bloodline, his personality had always been very casual and liked to enjoy life. He was not at all like some mages who were serious and rigid. Looking at this famous spellcaster from hundreds of years ago, Andre suddenly realized that the lich seemed to value him greatly. At the same time, he thought of the scene that happened in the depths of his consciousness. It was as if some kind of prophecy or omen was about to happen to him. Gently stroking the black eye patch on his left eye, he took a deep breath and muttered to himself, "The Eye of Arcane." What exactly is the Eye of Arcane? The Eye of Arcane? Is that the name of your left eye? I'm sorry, I've never heard of it, but I can help you ask my mentor. I believe he'll give you a satisfactory answer. Although Orlando did not know what his mentor was planning, he dared to guarantee that the young mage in front of him was definitely a crucial part of it. It could even be said to be the most crucial core. In fact, he himself was very interested in the Eye of Arcane. If not for the fact that his mentor valued it, he might have directly snatched it over to study it. Andre did not know what the half-elf was thinking at the moment. Even if he knew, he could not do anything to him. He only nodded lightly. Yes, the Eye of Arcane is its name. I hope to get an explanation as soon as possible. The sooner the better. No problem. I promise I'll immediately return and report to my mentor about what happened to you. Oh, right, before I leave, I have to remind you of 2 things. First, it's best to get rid of that pitiful succubus. Her existence is very likely to expose your secret. Second, there's an ambitious guy in the city who intends to use a sacrificial ritual to summon the projection of a greater devil. You'd better be careful. Having said that, Orlando placed one hand on his chest and performed an elegant elven salute. Then, his entire body began to gradually turn transparent, disappearing without a trace after 2 seconds. After watching the half-elf great mage leave, Andre instantly heaved a sigh of relief and rubbed his still swollen forehead. All of a sudden, he discovered that the tattoo on the back of his left hand had disappeared, and in its place was a sentence made up of unknown symbols. He did not know why, but he seemed to be able to understand the meaning of these symbols. Translated, it was, "The Eye of Future has awakened. When it merges with the Eye of the Past, the treasury of truth will be opened." This sentence was obviously not the entire sentence. There seemed to be another sentence behind it, but unfortunately, it was cut off here. The Eye of Future? The Eye of the Past? Could it be that the Eye of Arcane is a pair, and not just one? As a mage with an intelligence of more than 20, Andre was immediately inspired and quickly thought of various possibilities. Chapter 698. After passing through the crack in the material world, Grand Mage Orlando appeared in a dark underground palace. He was surrounded by dilapidated statues and murals. The exquisite carvings on the stone slabs showed the exquisite craftsmanship of the craftsman, as well as the bustling scenes of the past. However, as a powerful legendary mage, he knew that this was just a facade used to drive away those disgusting goblins, kobolds, orcs, and gnolls. Even though there wasn't any light, he still managed to find the entrance mechanism in front of a huge stone statue that was covered in moss with his dark vision. Instantly, the eyes of the statue released 2 rays of red light, scanning him from top to bottom. Then it greeted him in a low voice. "Welcome, Master Orlando. Master is now in the reference room. If you want to see him, please wait for a moment." "Thank you. Please inform him as soon as possible. I have something important to report to him." Saying that, the half-elf mage put his right hand into the mouth of the statue. A second later, he was transported to a hall filled with strange stone statues. Looking at these lifelike stone statues with different expressions, he could not help but shake his head with a bitter smile and sigh. Dear teacher, your collection is really rich. You've actually collected so many adventurers from various races. The number I've collected is less than 1/5 of yours. Without a doubt, these statues were not real statues, but living people imprisoned by the level 6 spell, petrification. As long as he cast a spell to remove the petrification, they would come back to life instantly. Other than being a little tired, they would be no different from before they were petrified. Of course, these fellows weren't anything good either. Some of them were daring adventurers who attempted to steal from the Lich's treasure vault. There were also some who were hired by the Church of the Gods or nobles to investigate what was hidden in this underground palace. However, in front of the old Lich, their pitiful strength couldn't even put up a fight. They were directly petrified and thrown here to be part of his collection. Perhaps one day the Lich was in a good mood and needed 2 people to run errands. Then they might be released and cast an enchantment spell on them, turning them into loyal servants. In the eyes of many powerful spellcasters, adventurers were toys that were responsible for making them happy. They could play with them however they wanted, and the etiquette and morals of the secular world had no binding effect on them. Just as Orlando was concentrating on admiring a human girl dressed as a ranger, the door leading deeper into the forest suddenly opened. The undying king, Absalom Blackburn, who was dressed in a gorgeous robe, slowly walked out. 2 cold lights flickered in his eyes, followed by a hoarse voice. Speak. Why are you looking for me in such a hurry? Minter, something happened to the young man you asked me to protect. I think it's necessary to explain it to you personally. Orlando hurriedly bowed slightly and replied, Oh, what accident? Could it be that even you can't handle it? The Lich's tone revealed a trace of scrutiny and reproach. Needless to say, he definitely thought that the half-elf was slacking off or trying to shirk responsibility. Orlando understood that his image in the eyes of his mentor was not very good, so he immediately shook his head with a bitter smile. No, esteemed mentor, please listen to my explanation. The young man named Andre's left, I suddenly changed, especially the golden ring that kept spinning in his pupil. With a single glance, one could tell that it was the embodiment of the truth that everything in the universe is a ring. Furthermore, he even called that eye the Arcane eye. Now I want to know what's going on with that eye. Could it be that you are conducting some dangerous experiment, or do you have some plan? After all, judging from the energy that burst out of that eye, even a legendary mage could die if hit by it. I don't want to be kept in the dark. His words were sonorous and forceful, and he did not allow the Lich to refuse. Perhaps in the past, the half-elf would not have the courage to go head-to-head with his mentor who taught him magic, but now that he was half a step into the legendary realm, the changes brought by the power were affecting his consciousness, and he believed that he had the qualifications to do so. The undying king stared at Orlando expressionlessly. In fact, his skeleton, without a trace of muscle, could not even make any expression. After a full minute, he let out a creepy laugh. Hee. It's not easy. I was still wondering when you would have the awareness of a legendary mage. Very good, very good. You've used a full 200 years to finally understand what unyielding dignity and bottom line is, and you dare to stand on the same level as me and talk to me. Remember, as a legendary mage, you don't have to fear anyone. Believe in the power of arcane magic. It can help you resist any form of danger. Since you have everything that a legendary mage should have, then there are some things that I don't have to hide from you. Before the catastrophe, there was a person in the Empire who predicted what would happen 100 years later, and his name was Emmanuel. At this point, the Lich's tone suddenly became full of nostalgia, as if he was recalling the most glorious era of mages. After pausing for a few seconds, he began to speak again. That's right. He was the greatest prophet in human history, the genius who made 100 accurate predictions. Even at that time, when there were countless talented mages, he was still the brightest star in the sky. With his accurate prophecies again and again, he allowed the Empire to prepare in advance and survive calamity after calamity. But this last time, he found that no matter what he did, he could not avoid the arrival of destruction. The magic civilization that flourished for a time was bound to fall, and the world would welcome the rule of the gods. Emmanuel was terrified. He informed the council of the results he obtained, and it instantly caused a huge uproar. The legendary mages could not accept such a prophecy. Some thought that he was crazy, some thought that he should research methods to kill the gods, and some thought that hiding and waiting for an opportunity was the best choice. After intense discussions and quarrels, the council finally made 3 decisions. The first was to hide part of the knowledge and wealth in case of an emergency. The second was to order a portion of the legendary mages to start researching methods to kill the gods. It was they who created the first dagger that could kill the gods, which triggered the crazy revenge of the gods. The third point, and the most important one, was that a fellow called Fount had raised a peculiar point of view, which triggered the Empire's 2 ultimate plans, the Arcane Eye and the Crystal Prison. Chapter 700. The Wildest Council was the highest governing body of the ancient magic empire. Every member of the council had to be at least a legendary mage, and they had to have made outstanding contributions in some aspect. Then, they had to be recommended by at least one of the council members. Only when the voting rate was more than 1/3, one could become a member. It was not only a symbol of identity, honor, and status, but it also controlled a huge amount of power and resources. Of course, since the catastrophe, this organization had been basically destroyed. More than 90% of the council members had died in the war with the gods, and only a few barely survived. According to Orlando's speculation, the reorganized Wildest Council was likely to have less than 10 members, but even so, it still had great value. After all, after the 3rd Great Magic Recession, there were not many spellcasters in the world who could cross the threshold of legendary, let alone develop legendary spells. As the survivors of the ancient magic empire, these people must have the precious wealth left behind in their hands. Even if a little bit of it was revealed through their fingers, it was enough to make the current mages go crazy, including him. Without any hesitation, the half-elf directly put one hand on his chest and bowed elegantly. "It's my honor to be a member of the council." "Very good. Now tell me, how is the young man's condition? Has that eye of his fully awakened? Under what circumstances did he awaken it?" Seeing the unconcealable desire in his disciple's eyes, the undead king nodded slightly and immediately asked about Andre's recent situation. As one of the few people who knew about the power of the Arcane Eye, he knew very well how much energy was needed to awaken this thing. With Andre's current mage level, it was impossible for him to control it. He doesn't seem to be in any danger. His physiological functions are all normal, but there's no way to control the energy ring that is emitted from his left eye all the time. The situation at that time was very complicated. According to my speculation, it should be the 2 memory runestones made with the Elijah's stone that accidentally triggered the Arcane Eye, followed by the resonance of the energy pool in the Mage Tower. In just a few seconds, more than 50% of the stored energy was depleted. I think this should be the reason for the awakening. As for the degree of awakening that you mentioned, I can't judge. I can only say that the energy impact that burst out at the moment of awakening was very terrifying. It directly disintegrated the 2 clay golems with strong magic resistance into tiny particles. But this kind of power is obviously uncontrollable. If he is allowed to wander around freely, it is only a matter of time before the gods discover him. In order to give his mentor a more intuitive impression, Orlando not only used words to describe it, but also pulled out the memory fragments in his mind to create an illusory image, just like a 3-dimensional movie. After looking at it, the undead king seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly muttered to himself, "Elaine's stone? No wonder. Mentor, do you mean that the Elijah's stone caused all of this to happen?" Orlando was keenly aware of this, and a surprised expression appeared on his face. The Elaine stone, also known as the Ion Stone, was a special gemstone first discovered by the legendary mages in the ancient magic empire. It floated above the wearer's head and could grant the wearer various abilities through enchantment. For example, It could increase strength, intelligence, dexterity, and other basic attributes. It could also allow wounds to heal automatically, form an invisible defensive field, absorb spells cast by enemies, or store spells that one didn't normally use. All in all, it was an epic-making invention, and it was not subject to any form of restriction, as long as the wearer's own spirit was strong enough to control it. But like most powerful magical minerals, the Elaine stone gradually dried up in the Audiobook with the crazy mining of mages. Now, it was almost rarely seen, and even if there were, it was a defective product from some ancient ruins. Each stone was worth at least tens of thousands of gold coins. The half-elf completely didn't understand why the Elaine stone could be connected to the Arcane Eye. The undead king sighed softly and explained, "The Arcane Eye itself is refined from tens of thousands of the purest Elaine stones. It stores all the known magical knowledge and skills at that time, and is endowed with an independent mind and the power to create objects out of thin air. Any storage type Elaine stone may have a chain reaction with it when it is activated, and the result is to be absorbed and fused. In addition to absorbing a large amount of energy from the Mage Tower, it is not surprising that it awakens in advance. This is a big problem that is not in the plan. That young man, named Andre, obviously doesn't have the ability to control the Arcane Eye, so we must find a way to shield the energy ring it emits. Sorry, Minter, I'm afraid I can't do that. Also, I'm curious. Why don't you try to invite him to join us? I believe that with the knowledge you have stored, there is absolutely no mage who can refuse this temptation. In this way, we can better protect him, and we can also close the distance so that he can be used by us in the future." Orlando held it in for a long time, and finally couldn't help but ask the question in his heart. He really couldn't understand why he had to make things so complicated. He could clearly use a simpler and more direct method to solve the problem, but he chose the most awkward one. Haha, because the holder of the arcane, I must use his own eyes to observe, learn, and understand. We can't interfere in any way. Otherwise, once he becomes a mage with the same way of thinking as us, then everything will be meaningless. Let's do it this way. Regarding the shielding energy ring, I will solve it through the council as soon as possible. You only need to empty all the temples in the Sardinia Islands. Remember, you must not expose yourself. We are not ready to fight the gods again, so make sure you do it cleanly." After saying that, the undead king raised his fleshless fingerbone and touched the badge on his chest. His entire body seemed to be affected by a powerful gravitational force and was directly squeezed into pieces, slowly drilling into the cracks in the air and quickly disappearing without a trace. Without a doubt, this was an interdimensional teleportation spell. He had already left the material world and was heading towards the secret location of the Virtus Council. Perhaps it was a hidden half-plane, or perhaps it was another new world that the gods of Audiobook could not reach. Feeling the power of the Lich easily tearing through space, the corners of Orlando's mouth curled up slightly, and he muttered to himself, "Don't worry, my dear mentor, I don't even need to do it myself with those weak priests in Valen City." Chapter 701. In fact, the half-elf great mage's words were not exaggerated at all. As soon as he returned to the Sardinia Islands, he personally went around the slave market and used group charm to control more than 20 strong slaves. Among them were monsters like orcs, half-orcs, and earth goblins, as well as human warriors who had undergone strict training. He cast AoE buffs, such as Bear's Endurance, Bull's Strength, and Cat's Grace on these guys. Then, he distributed weapons and armors to them. In just a few minutes, the group of thugs were fully armed. In order to prevent accidents, he even attached elemental energy to their weapons. After doing all this, a satisfied smile appeared on Orlando's face. He immediately ordered the slaves to attack the 2 remaining temples on the island. The priests stationed in the temples did not expect that there would be someone so daring. In the blink of an eye, they were chopped into meat paste in their sleep. Even the apprentices and the servants in charge of cleaning were not spared. Everywhere they went, there was no one left. Not only did they kill everyone, But the controlled thugs also set the place on fire, and the blazing flames lit up the night sky. Many believers who lived near the temple rushed out with buckets of water to put out the fire. But what they did not expect was that before they could get close, they were blocked by more than 20 ferocious-looking guys. The other party did not even say a word of nonsense and killed everyone they saw, as if they were completely crazy. One had to know that the temples represented the majesty of the gods they belonged to. It represented the supreme divine right. Killing the priests first, then burning the temples, and finally massacring the believers wantonly was definitely a blatant blasphemy against the gods. As a member of the evil camp, the goddess of the ocean was the first to send down the divine punishment. Although she was restricted by the gods and could not send down incarnations or entities like saints, she could use another form to express her anger. The originally calm sea suddenly became turbulent. In just a few seconds, a terrifying eye of the storm was formed. The huge wave, which was hundreds of meters high, was like the arm of the Titan in the myths, smashing into the city and the thugs. The terrible water pressure directly crushed the houses, and the fate of the people was even more tragic. The cavity in the body was crushed, and the internal organs instantly spewed out of the mouth and nose. The eyeballs were also strongly squeezed and flew out. The power of the gods was so strong. It was so powerful that mortals were powerless against it. They could almost do whatever they wanted within the scope of their clergy. For example, the clergy of the goddess of ocean was coastal waters, so she could set off a storm in the coastal waters at will, overturn a ship she didn't like, and set off a tsunami to destroy an entire coastal city. The half-elf great mage hiding in the dark saw this scene, and not only did he not show a trace of fear, he even sneered and mocked. What a stupid god! It was no wonder that he could not break through from a low-level divine power to a mid-level divine power, even after hundreds of years. But this is also good. Thank you for cleaning up all the traces for me. Although the power of the gods was terrifying, it was not unattainable in the eyes of the legendary mages. Many powerful legendary spells could seriously injure or even kill the gods. Regarding this point, it had been repeatedly confirmed before the destruction of the ancient magic civilization. At least a dozen gods had died in the hands of the legendary mages, and many others had fallen into a long slumber, showing no signs of waking up even now. Therefore, as a quasi-legendary mage, he did not have much respect for the gods. Instead, he was full of contempt and hatred. The temper of the goddess of ocean was like a thunderstorm, coming and going quickly. After killing a few mortals who had offended his dignity, the terrifying storm quickly dissipated, and the sea slowly regained its calm. Apart from a few ships that had been overturned and smashed to pieces in the harbor, only the collapsed buildings on the streets, as well as the residents who had been accidentally injured, could prove how shocking what had just happened was. On the contrary, the goddess of wealth did not seem to care that her temple was burned at all, and she did not react at all from beginning to end. After successfully completing the task given by the undead king, Orlando immediately hid himself, and, at the same time, used the power of arcane magic to completely shield all his information, silently waiting for the two goddesses to shift their gazes away from the Sardinia Islands. At the same time, in the central control room of the Mage Tower, Andre was adapting to the new ability brought about by the awakening of the Arcane Eye. Since the mutation of his left eye, he accidentally discovered that he could actually digitize the people or animals he observed. For example, as long as he stared at the crazy Carmen for more than 3 seconds, a large amount of information would immediately appear. Carmen, demon name. Ulrika Claridge Martha Levins, gender, female race. Venari demon, succubus alignment. Chaotic evil attributes, strength, 18 agility, 14 vitality, 14 intelligence, 16 perceptive sense, 13 charm, 25 health points, 75 to 75, permanent insanity cannot be recovered, special abilities, energy absorption, succubi can absorb life force by touching the target, which is often called the succubus's kiss, summon the Nari demon. Once a day, Succubi can summon their own kind from anywhere, provided that the summoning does not exceed their own strength, and other demons are also required to be willing to respond to the summoning. Dark Vision Constant Worm Tongue, equivalent to a universal translator, automatically translating the words that succubi do not understand into words that they can understand, and at the same time translating their own words into words that the other party can understand. Innate spells, charm monster, detect kindness, detect thoughts, change appearance, suggestion, error-free teleportation without a doubt. This was the attribute panel of a typical succubus. Although she looked weak and beautiful on the surface, she was completely a monster on the inside. If a human wanted to defeat her, a melee profession would need to be at least level 10, and a spellcaster profession would need to be at least level 7. However, it was a pity that even such a powerful otherworld creature had become a mindless lunatic under the power of the Eye of Arcane. She could only talk nonsense, and no matter how you beat her, scold her, or even kill her, she would not resist at all. Looking at Carmen, who had bitten her finger and was lying on the ground drawing a circle with her own blood, Andre sighed helplessly and ordered the huge flesh puppet, "Kill her." "Yes, master," the soul of the fire elemental replied clumsily in the common language, and immediately broke into a run, using its thick elbows to smash the succubus into the wall. The terrifying strength instantly squeezed her body out of shape, and then it waved its 4 pincers and tore at her crazily. In just half a minute, Carmen was completely dismembered into a pile of minced meat. Even with the strong vitality of a demon, there was no way she could survive in such a state. Chapter 702. My dear, I'm sorry. I can't let a demon who knows my secret and can't think properly continue to live. But don't worry, I'll take good care of your newborn daughter. Andre looked at the bloody body on the ground and said those words calmly. It seemed that he was talking to the succubus, but also to himself. He knew that Carmen was dead for real this time, and it was impossible for him to be reborn in the bottomless abyss. He also couldn't tell anyone about what happened today, or the half-elf archmage wouldn't have suggested that he should get rid of Carmen as soon as possible. Of course, what was more important was that his emotions were affected by the energy ring emitted from his left eye. All of his desires, impulses, anger, happiness, sadness, and pain were weakening rapidly. He was under the control of absolute rationality, just like a sophisticated electronic computer. He could only make the most beneficial choice from his own point of view. Andre hated this kind of feeling. Although he always advocated using rationality to suppress impulses, this kind of state was obviously too much. To be exact, he was more like a monster than a human being. But it was a pity that he had no other choice but to accept it silently. Fortunately, the situation wasn't too bad. At the very least, all the knowledge, spells, and construction methods of the Mage Tower were deeply imprinted in his mind, making up for his lack of basic knowledge. Learning and researching magic was never something that could be accomplished overnight. Taking shortcuts would cost a lot, and Andre knew it very well, especially in arcana geometry, arcana engineering, planar knowledge, principle of energy gathering, enchantment, and constancy theory. He might not even be as good as an apprentice when it came to arcana geometry and arcana engineering. While digesting the knowledge in his head, he came to Gerald's body and took off all of his rings, earrings, amulets, nose studs, anklets, and jeweled headbands to identify them. It was the 3rd time that he had killed an advanced sorcerer in just a few days. Therefore, he knew very well that the spoils are the most valuable and should be prioritized. After about 10 minutes, Andre finally figured out the function of these magic items. First of all, there were 2 rings. One of them stored 3 stone skin spells, which was the first choice of most sorcerers. The other one stored the repulsion spell, which would push the succubus away and make it impossible for her to get any closer. Next was the amulet, which was a rather ancient treasure that allowed the wearer to maintain their arcane vision. Then there was the nose stud and the anklet. The latter stored haste, while the former provided a very strange property, which was to give the wearer a nose as sensitive as that of a canine. Finally, there was the gemstone headband and earrings. The headband could prevent the wearer from being affected by charm and suggestion spells, but in terms of fancy, it was obviously more feminine. The earrings were the opposite. The workmanship was very rough, and they were typical men's earrings. Their purpose was to increase perception. After figuring out the purpose of everything, Andre put on the anklet and hid it in his boots. At the same time, he replaced the secondary health amulet with a new amulet. After all, it was much more useful to maintain arcane vision than to heal minor injuries 3 times a day. As for the rest that he did not need at the moment, he stuffed them all into his pocket and would deal with them when he returned to Linden City. After doing all this, he calmed down and carefully observed the most valuable bracelet with the most complicated magic patterns. The craftsmanship of this item was so complicated that he had to repeatedly cast a dozen identification spells before he finally identified it. It turned out that it was a spatial device used by ancient mages to carry constructs around with them. It could hold up to 5 giant golems at a time. This is a great harvest. No wonder people say that robbing sorcerers is always the fastest way to make a fortune, provided that you can survive the revenge of the sorcerers. Chuckling to himself, Andre quickly connected the magic patterns on the bracelet and locked onto the giant flesh puppet. After only 1 second, the flesh puppet was put into the space of the bracelet. At the same time, one of the 5 colorless gems turned red, indicating that a position was filled. Feeling the powerful ability of the bracelet, he could not help but exclaim, "Convenient, fast, instantaneous storage, instantaneous retrieval. No need for incantations, no need for preparation. It could not be more convenient." No wonder everyone said that after the 3rd Great Magic Recession, modern mages have been castrated. Facts speak louder than words. In order to understand all the functions of the bracelet, Andre immediately began to test it repeatedly. In the end, he found that this thing could only store constructs and could not be changed to fit other things. Helplessly, he could only comfort himself. One can't be too greedy. It's not bad to be able to store 5 constructs. It just so happens that there are 4 golems in this sorcerer's tower. I'll take them all with me when I leave. This way, even if I encounter an army of monsters in the wild, I can easily kill them all. Just as he was about to deal with the corpses and bloodstains on the ground, he suddenly heard a short and urgent voice. "Emergency! The Ratmen and the Underground Guild started a war an hour ago. The leader of the Ratmen, Old Bernie, sent someone to tell me that he wants to meet you for a discussion. What is your answer?" Andre instantly realized that this was Angus sending him a message through the secret imprint. Without any hesitation, he directly replied through the secret imprint, "Say yes, and then tell him the time and place of the meeting. I'll be there on time. Also, let me tell you a piece of good news. Gerald Jenkinson is dead. I killed him with a scheme, and now the Sorcerer's Tower is under my control." Really? Angus could not believe it at all, and excitedly replied a message immediately. "Of course it's true, and I've also obtained all the knowledge, spells, and control of the golems stored in the tower." In order to give some confidence to this bald sorcerer, the only one who relied on him, Andre told him part of the truth. He was very clear about the attraction of a sorcerer's tower to sorcerers. As long as he firmly held the highest authority, there would be plenty of sorcerers who would be willing to pledge their loyalty to him. "You wait. I'll settle this matter immediately, and then go back to meet you. We'll discuss the next arrangements while we're at it." Angus, who had received a positive answer, was so excited that he could not control himself. He hurriedly replied another message, and then cut off the communication between the two. Obviously, although he already believed that this was the truth in his heart, he still could not help but want to confirm it with his own eyes. After all, Gerald Jenkinson was like an invincible monster, firmly suppressing the heads of all the sorcerers in the tower. Now that the monster had been killed, he would not feel at ease if he did not confirm it with his own eyes. Chapter 703. In the dusky underground cavern of Valen City's dock area, Old Bernie was completely focused on roasting rat meat, paying no attention to the faint sounds of killing coming from outside. He didn't show any signs of panic, as if everything was under his control. A few minutes later, the bloody meat turned a golden yellow. The oil and spices mixed together to release an enticing aroma. He carefully tore off a piece and put it in his mouth, using his few remaining teeth to slowly chew, a satisfied smile appearing on his aged face. As an old man who was about to enter his coffin, he wasn't afraid of death at all, much less starting a war with anyone. Although in the eyes of many people, the Underground Guild was an undefeatable colossus, in his eyes, it was only SOSO. More than an hour had passed since the enemy had officially launched their attack, and they hadn't even broken through the first line of defense. After the modifications, the tangled and complicated alleyways were like a maze, becoming the most suitable battlefield for the Ratmen. No matter how many people the enemy sent in, they would be slowly whittled down by the ambush and encirclement. Slaughter and death had rejuvenated old Bernie's aged heart. He even found that his appetite was better than usual, and his energy was more vigorous. His usually drowsy mind was now incomparably clear. Perhaps it was just as the saying went, the greatness of war lay in the fact that it could strip away all the various disguises on a human's body, restoring their true self, and making it clear whether they were brave warriors or cowards. Without a doubt, the Rat King was a true warrior. Not only was he not afraid of war, he was actually somewhat excited, and this excitement was faithfully reflected on his aged body. Just as the entire skewer of rat meat had entered his stomach, a figure suddenly darted out from the darkness. He quickly approached and reported in a low voice, "Leader, I've already sent the message as you requested. The other party has agreed to meet you on the ship at midnight today." Oof. At least he knows what's good for him. If he dares to refuse, I guarantee that I'll reveal all the confidential information in my hands to the people of the Union. Old Bernie laughed coldly as he wiped the oil from his mouth, his eyes emitting a frightening, cold light. "Leader, I don't understand. Since the other party is using Patty to start a war between us and the Union, why are you still negotiating with them?" Black Shadow, who had been hiding in the dark, asked in confusion. He knew that although the old chief had always been dissatisfied with his grandson's impetuous character, blood was still thicker than water. In fact, he had always sent people to secretly protect Patty. Normally, if someone took advantage of Patty's character weakness, the chief would be furious. But now he actually wanted to meet the person. Old Bernie shook his head with a smile and explained, "No, you don't understand, child. Things aren't as simple as you think. Especially this time, we have to stand behind the victor. Otherwise, the entire race will be annihilated. All right, hurry up and prepare the ship. Leave the rest to me. Remember, continue to send people to keep an eye on Patty. Don't let this idiot do anything stupid." "Understood." The Black Shadow bowed and quickly disappeared into the darkness. After watching his men leave, old Bernie sighed and muttered to himself, "Damn it. Why is my grandson so weak? Who will be able to stand up and lead the tribe after my death?" Just when the Rat King was lamenting that there was no successor, Angus finally returned to his original appearance. He swaggered into the central control room of the Wizard Tower. As he walked, he also admired the changes in the surrounding layout. He saw that the elemental pool that was originally hidden under the ground was summoned, forming a wonderful and magnificent scene in the center of the room. Earth, water, fire, wind, positive energy, negative energy, all kinds of magic energy that had gathered were tumbling and boiling, as if they were being pulled by some invisible force. They were constantly evolving into countless spell models. The speed and variety were simply beyond imagination. And the person who was controlling all of this was the one-eyed dragon version of Andre, who was standing next to him. At this moment, he was staring at the changes in the elemental pool with full concentration. His two hands were constantly making complicated casting gestures, and his mouth never stopped chanting incantations that were difficult to understand. Although Angus didn't know what the young man in front of him who had defeated him was doing, he didn't dare to rashly interrupt at all. This was because magic rituals were dangerous and difficult to control. The slightest unstable factor could lead to disastrous consequences. As a 9th-rank wizard, He was very clear on what would happen if the elemental pool that the wizard tower used to gather energy went out of control or exploded. At that time, not to mention the wizard tower, the entire Valen City, and even the island that Valen City was on, would be razed to the ground. The rampaging energy would turn an area of tens of kilometers into a chaotic magic zone. Any caster who dared to cast an arcane spell here would immediately trigger unpredictable results. For example, a small level 0 spell could very well become a level 5 spell or above. Of course, a level 5 spell or above could also become a level 0 spell. Feeling the elemental pool become more and more active, Angus started to sweat involuntarily. He even had the thought of immediately escaping from this dangerous place. Just as he was about to put this thought into action, Andre, who was completely focused, seemed to have sensed something. He finally slowly stopped and calmed down the restless energy. After doing all this, he turned around and bowed with a smile. "Good evening, my dear friend. Look, I'm a man of my word. If I say I'll take down the wizard tower in 2 days, then I'll take down the wizard tower in 2 days. Where's Gerald Jenkinson? If I don't see his corpse with my own eyes, I won't be at ease." Angus never liked to talk nonsense, and directly raised the question that concerned him the most. "There, in the corner over there. But I have something even better here that can prove that he's dead." As he spoke, Andre took out the spirit crystal pillar that Carmen had made and shook it. "Gerald's soul. How dare you imprison his soul?" Angus' pupils contracted violently at first, and then rapidly enlarged. His voice was full of fear and trembling. Without a doubt, he knew what it meant to have a soul imprisoned. He also knew that such a method could only be used by demons and devils of the lower planes, so he started to feel terrified. Andre shook his head with a smile and comforted him. "Relax, buddy. You're too nervous. This thing wasn't made by me, but by a succubus. I just took it for myself, that's all. Now that I've fulfilled my promise, it's your turn." Chapter 704. Angus smiled bitterly as he stared at the soul in the crystal pillar. He then took a deep breath and mocked himself. "Do I have any other choice? Obviously no. I do need someone to manage this wizard tower, but that person may not be you. So, you'd better make your choice quickly." Andre destroyed the bald wizard's last bit of delusion without any expression. Under the control of absolute rationality, all his human nature and emotions were suppressed to the limit. He could only make the judgment that was most beneficial to himself based on the situation. Angus felt this extremely cold will. At the same time, he also knew that he was now in the wizard tower and had no room to bargain at all. In desperation, he could only take out the dagger that he always carried with him and gently cut a small wound on his wrist, letting the bright red blood drip into the elemental pool. He muttered in a low voice, "Blood is a guide. I swear on my soul that I will always be loyal to the master of the wizard tower until the end of my life." As soon as he finished speaking, the colorful elemental pool instantly released a dazzling red light. The wound that was originally only 1 centimeter long seemed to be pulled by an invisible force and quickly spread across the entire forearm. It gradually formed a complicated and exquisite pattern, followed by scabs little by little, and finally disappeared completely. As the master of the wizard tower, Andre immediately sensed that a person's soul was closely connected with the wizard tower itself. He nodded in satisfaction. "Very good. It seems that you've made the right choice. In return, I'll grant you the right and status in this wizard tower, second only to me. You'll be in charge of all affairs when I'm not around. Now, help me clean up the interior, especially Gerald Jenkinson's loyal followers. None of them can be left alive." After saying that, he stretched out his right hand and gently tapped on Angus's bald head. The rune that symbolized the arcane eye immediately disappeared into it. Angus was not an idiot. He understood that this was the other party giving him the authority to control the mage tower. Thus, he obediently lowered his head, showing respect and submission. Since things had already developed to this point, the so-called dignity was already worthless. He might as well put on a humble front as soon as possible so that he could obtain more benefits in the future. However, he obviously did not know that all his hidden secrets have been exposed through the rune just now. Angus, real name, Walter Brimner, gender, male race, human alignment, lawful evil attributes, strength, 8 agility, 10 physique, 11 intelligence, 17 perception, 13 charm, 12 profession. Goral's mage, level 9 incantation mastery, HP, 33/41, light injury, special abilities. Curse type mastery, increases spell slots by 1 per level, and increases the power of curse type arcane spells. Magic tattoo, anywhere door, a special skill of wizard Goral's, inherited from the ancient magic civilization. It can store any spell through the tattoo. Each time it is used, it will consume 1 spell slot of the corresponding level. The anywhere door is used for short-distance teleportation. It can help mages escape from danger quickly. Magic pet, raven. Looking at the feedback from his retina, the corner of Andre's mouth curled up slightly. His only eye that was exposed to the air was glowing. He stared at the bald mage for a full minute before he asked in a teasing tone, "Interesting, very interesting. Do you think I should call you Walter Brimner or Angus now? As far as I know, the Goral's kingdom is at least 2,000 nautical miles away from the Sardinia Islands. As one of them, why have you appeared in Valen City? Is there some unspeakable secret?" The Goral's kingdom, also known as the Fairy Kingdom, meant successor in the common language. After the destruction of the ancient magic civilization, they unintentionally discovered the remains of a floating city that had fallen from the sky. They unearthed countless magical knowledge and technology from it, quickly growing into a colossus that frightened the surrounding countries. It was said that with the power of 7 million subjects, they supported close to 2,000 official mages and 10,000 acolytes. The terrifying army of constructs could take down any of their neighbors in just a few days. However, it was a pity that this power was not united. Instead, it was divided into several factions that constantly fought amongst themselves, dragged others down, and fought for resources. Furthermore, the great druids in the Tavern Forest were hostile towards them for their destruction of nature. Large numbers of trance, animals, and elementals were summoned to attack them from time to time, causing the entire kingdom to be unable to expand greatly. Andre didn't quite understand. The Goral's kingdom had such abundant resources, so why would this guy in front of him run to such a remote island? It was as suspicious as someone with great wealth and a noble title sneaking into the streets and alleys to be a hooligan. You, how did you know? Having his secret exposed, Angus was so shocked that he couldn't even speak properly. His body couldn't help but tremble. He dared to swear on his life that ever since he left his hometown, he had never mentioned anything about his past to anyone. Even prophecy magic couldn't pry into it so clearly. How I know isn't important. What's important is that there won't be any unnecessary misunderstandings between us. You need to give me an explanation. In fact, Andre didn't care at all about what Angus had done in the past, let alone whether he had escaped or not. He only wanted to confirm the course of events so that he could ascertain the possible risks. Touching his bald head, Angus couldn't help but sigh. Sigh, since you already know, there's no harm in telling you. I killed someone in the Goral's kingdom who shouldn't have been killed. As a result, I attracted the revenge of my enemies. In order to survive, I had to try my best to escape as far as possible. Otherwise, if I were to be caught, it would be 100 times worse than death. Don't worry, I've been living in seclusion here for 5 years. The possibility of being discovered isn't high. Andre nodded thoughtfully. This answer wasn't out of his expectations. Moreover, the two places were more than 2,000 nautical miles apart. Even if Angus had great power in the Goral's kingdom, it was impossible for him to reach all the way to the Sardinia Islands. He could tell that Angus's ambition was not great. He only wanted to avoid the pursuit of his enemies and continue on the path of magic until one day he had enough power. Only then would he resolutely step on the path of returning home. In other words, this guy wasn't a threat at all. On the contrary, He was extremely useful. After all, the magic education system in the Goral's kingdom was far more successful than the southern city-states. He was an extremely rare talent, at least in Valen City. Chapter 705. No matter when and where, talents were always the most desirable thing for those in power. No matter how much they had, they would never be satisfied. Andre knew very well that he could not stay in this remote and desolate archipelago forever. So he had to find a capable and relatively reliable person to help manage this simple mage tower. In particular, the elemental pool was the core part of the mage tower. Its value was beyond imagination, and no one in the southern city-states could make it. Gerald Jenkinson once said that a mage tower was a mage's home, sanctuary, research center, and fortress. Its status and value were irreplaceable. As a mage, Andre would have to build his own mage tower one day. When that time came, the elemental pool used to store energy would become an indispensable thing. Therefore, no matter what, there could not be any problems here. Otherwise, he might not be able to buy it, even if he had the money. Therefore, after much consideration, he decided to take the risk and give it a try. So, he said to the uneasy Angus, "Well, since you don't want to talk about your past, I don't want to continue asking. Now, I'll give you an hour to clean up all the people who are in my way. After an hour, I don't want to see anyone who dares to defy my will." "You mean, kill them all?" Angus opened his mouth wide in surprise, as if he had heard an unbelievable order. One had to know that there were very few mages in the entire southern region, and every one of them was very precious. Unless they had committed an unforgivable crime, they would usually be imprisoned at most or forced to sign a harsh magic contract. Killing them all was very rare. There were not many official mages in the Sardinia archipelago to begin with, and the number of apprentices was also pitifully small. If a great purge was carried out, it would definitely shake the foundation and might even cause the mage tower to not be able to operate normally. That's right, kill them all, leave no one alive. Remember, I don't like to leave any trouble behind, so clean your hands and feet. If necessary, I authorize you to mobilize the golems." After saying that, Andre raised his hand and snapped his fingers. The entire mage tower was instantly enveloped by a layer of invisible membrane. All the teleportation spells were ineffective. The people outside could not enter, and the people inside could not leave. "You're crazy." "Well, I'll take care of all this according to your request." Angus licked his dry lips, turned around, and disappeared into the corridor outside. When he went out, he also took the golem guarding the door with him. He understood that he needed to use blood and slaughter to gain the other party's trust. He had no other choice but to obey from head to toe. In fact, from the moment the acid arrow was shot into his mouth, he already knew how cruel and ruthless Andre was to his enemies. Andre would either not do anything or go all out. Angus didn't want to make an enemy out of such a person, nor did he dare to make an enemy out of such a person. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to sacrifice Gerald Jenkinson's disciples and trusted followers. In the short span of half an hour, a level 3 wizard, 3 apprentices, 2 servants, and a manager in charge of purchasing items had all been punched in the chest by the golem without any warning, turning into cold corpses. They didn't even have the chance to resist, and the remaining people were all escorted to the central control room to await their fate. Quick, decisive, and merciless. Angus used his own practical actions to prove what a qualified subordinate was and what an excellent lackey was. Of course, you couldn't expect such a person to have any principles, integrity, or loyalty. To put it bluntly, he just wanted to live a better life. As long as the enemy's strength was enough to threaten his life, he might betray them immediately. Looking at the crowd standing in the empty hall, trembling with fear, Andre had a faint smile on his face. He then threw the ring that stored the rejection spell to the bald wizard and praised him. "Well done. This is your reward. I've never been a stingy person. As long as you work hard, I promise you'll get a generous reward." "Thank you for your generosity. It's my honor to serve you." Angus bowed deeply, showing unprecedented respect and submission in front of everyone. He was not a fool. He recognized at a glance that the ring was the one that Gerald usually wore on his finger. Its value was self-evident. He had definitely made a big profit this time. Benefits were always the best lubricant in the communication between people. It could not only turn former allies into enemies, but also turn enemies who hated each other into allies. After figuring out the function of the ring, Angus, who was forced to carry out the cleansing order, even had a terrifying thought that it would be good to serve such a person. After all, as a 9th-level wizard, he couldn't cast a 6th-level arcane spell at all. Now that he had unexpectedly obtained a ring that stored a 6th-level arcane spell, it would be strange if he didn't go wild with joy. Ignoring the fierce struggle in Angus' heart, Andre glanced at the remaining 20 or so people in the tower with his sharp eyes. Among them were wizards, apprentices, and servants. When they entered the door, they had already seen the body of Gerald Jenkinson and understood what had happened. Although they were full of fear at the beginning, after thinking about the cause and effect, they were no longer afraid. Some of the smarter ones began to lower their heads slightly, try to make themselves look as respectful as possible. As soon as the young man in front of them opened his mouth, they would immediately kneel down and pledge their loyalty. As the saying goes, those who are righteous are mostly butchers, while those who are unfaithful are mostly scholars. The smarter a person was, the more reasonable a person was, the more he would not joke about his own life. Unless they wanted to gain more benefits for their family or their descendants through death, they would definitely submit to the strong at the first moment. After confirming that there were no hostile eyes in the crowd, Andre nodded with satisfaction and said with a smile, "Very good. It seems that you have all made your choice. Then I don't need to say any more nonsense. Remember, I'm the owner of this wizard tower from now on. If I'm not here, you have to obey Angus's orders. If anyone dares to secretly disobey, I don't mind letting him taste torture more terrible than death. Do you understand?" Yes. Everyone on the scene responded loudly in unison. No one dared to say a word of no, and no one dared to stand up and resist. Gerald Jenkinson and his cronies were already dead. For the rest of the people, it was just a change of master. As long as it didn't infringe on their own interests, why would they stand up for others? Without much effort, Andre brought the entire wizard tower under his control. The next thing he had to do was to check the inventory so that he could know what to do. Chapter 706. Sir, according to our analysis, there's only 42% of the energy stored in the elemental pool, which is only enough to release 500 rank 3 Arcana techniques, 250 rank 4 Arcana techniques, 125 rank 5 Arcana techniques, 62 rank 6 Arcana techniques. Sir, in the basement warehouse, there are 456,300 gold coins, 1,600,000 silver coins, 15 kilograms of mithril, 3 kilograms of adamantine, 2 kilograms of shade steel, and more than 1,000 gems. There are also wood, clay, bones, steel, and stone that can be used to make magic traps. There are too many types of spellcasting materials to count, but according to the daily consumption, it can last for at least 15 years. Sir, we have sufficient food reserves. Staple foods such as flour and oats, salt, olive oil, spices, and other condiments, we have everything you need. Fresh vegetables and fruits can be cultivated through the Arcane Garden, and meat and eggs can be provided by the corral. Even if we completely cut off all contact with the outside world, we can still ensure a healthy diet for 50 people. Your Excellency, there are currently 600 books related to magic, 1,400 books related to biology, geography, poetry, stories, miscellaneous books, and more. The total number of spells is over 60. The Arcane Garden, the Binding Room, the Explosion Room, the Library, the Exploration Room, the Sealing Room, the Workshop, and other special rooms are all normal. The Magic Portal is also ready for your use at any time. Rich. Too rich. This wizard tower that had been supported by the pirates for hundreds of years was indeed a huge treasure trove, enough to make anyone go crazy. As the reports reverberated in the central control room, Andre finally understood why the heroes in the Bard stories were always able to obtain unimaginable wealth and treasures from the Wizard Tower after defeating the evil wizard. As the lair of a high-ranked wizard, the Wizard Tower stored all of the wizard's wealth and resources. It was completely designed according to the requirements of not having to step out of the door for decades, or even centuries. If they needed clean water, they could open a passage to the outside world. If they needed food, they could cultivate it through the Arcane Garden. If they needed to purchase rare materials, they just had to adjust the coordinates of the teleportation portal, and they could appear in any known market in the world in the blink of an eye. It was said that some wizards even satisfied their physiological needs with something called the pleasure golem, similar to an electric blow-up doll in another world. It was simply crazy. Even though this was only the lowest level mage tower, it had all the necessary functions. Moreover, it was hidden deep underground, so even if there was a typhoon or a tsunami outside, there was no need to worry. Sitting on the chair that originally belonged to Gerald Jenkinson, Andre held his chin and connected his spirit with the Wizard Tower. He felt the surging energy in the elemental pool, felt the unactivated traps and mechanisms in the tunnel, and felt the large number of monsters that he could summon with just a thought. He finally knew how risky the assassination plan was. If there was even the slightest mistake, he would be the one dead now. Of course, this was all in the past. Andre was never a person who liked to dwell on the past, so after attributing it to fate, he stopped thinking about it. However, this fate was somewhat different from the fate that most people in the world understood. He believed that life was living and luck was luck. First, one had to be alive, and then there would be luck. This was the fate in his eyes. It was very simple and easy to understand. It was not an illusory thing. In the short battle with Gerald, Andre survived, so naturally, he was more favored by fate than his opponent. That was all. Powerful power was always particularly intoxicating, especially the huge amount of energy stored in the elemental pool, which gave Andre an illusion of omnipotence. Just when he was about to sink into it and could not extricate himself, he suddenly heard a baby crying. He opened his eyes and saw Alfred holding the little succubus at the door of the room. The little succubus's young face was full of embarrassment and helplessness. The boy took a deep breath and gathered his courage to explain, "I'm very sorry to disturb you, but this little one has been crying for more than an hour. I think she seems to be hungry, so I want to find some milk or porridge." "Haha, relax, child. I should be the one apologizing. I was so busy just now that I forgot that you and this little one haven't eaten yet. To make up for this mistake, I've decided to treat you to a good meal. Tell me, what do you want to eat? I'll ask the kitchen to prepare it for you right away. Besides, the little one in your arms doesn't need milk or porridge. What she needs is desire, the desire that comes from the primitive instincts of human beings." After saying that, Andre winked at the female mage behind him. The latter quickly took 2 steps forward, took the little succubus from the boy's arms, and brought her directly to her room without saying a word. After a while, there was a rapid panting in the room. When the little succubus heard the panting, she immediately stopped crying, opened her mouth, and inhaled the invisible desire into her stomach. In just a few minutes, she showed a satisfied smile. Succubi were born from the desire of human beings, so they mainly fed on desire. Only the process of producing desire could satisfy their tricky appetite, and lust happened to be one of the easiest desires to create. Alfred did not know what kind of food the little succubus needed to eat, and Andre did not intend to let an underage child know for the time being, so he did not explain much. He just pointed to the chair opposite him and motioned for him to sit down. Then, he gestured to the mirror placed in the room, and soon, a sumptuous meal was served on the table. This is too luxurious. Are we the only ones eating?" Alfred asked, dumbfounded as he looked at the exquisite dishes on the table. He could not believe that he was stealing and begging on the streets last night, and today he could sit in a luxurious room and enjoy the most delicious food. The change in his life came too quickly, too suddenly, and he was somewhat at a loss. "No, this is just your dinner. Enjoy it. I still have something to do, so I need to leave for a few hours. Rest early after you're done eating. We'll talk about the matter of learning magic tomorrow." After saying that, Andre stood up and patted the boy's shoulder lightly. Then, he lowered his voice and said to Angus, "I'll leave everything in the wizard tower to you for the time being. Remember two things. First, after I leave, no one is allowed to get in touch with the outside world. Second, stop all large-scale experiments for a while and replenish the elemental pool as much as possible. If anyone dares to try to get in touch with the outside world, then immediately suppress them with thunderous means, even if it means killing them to establish your authority." Chapter 707. The bald wizard nodded solemnly. "Understood. I'll arrange things according to the wartime situation. You'd better be careful. The rat folk have always been fickle, and they might play some tricks during the negotiations." It doesn't matter if they play tricks or not. Now that things have developed to this point, victory is already within my grasp. Whether it's the rat folk or the underground guilds, they're all fish on the chopping board. I can eat them whenever I want. The only thing I need to be wary of are the pirates guarding the highest point of the castle. After gaining complete control of the wizard tower, Andre had become one of the most powerful forces in the archipelago. He could even use destructive magic to wipe out the rat folk and the underground guilds from this world in a matter of minutes. The reason he didn't do so was because he didn't want to cause too much damage to the citizens of the city, and also because he didn't want to alert the pirates in advance and cause them to give up on the decisive battle with the navy of Lincoln and return prematurely. If he lost the huge pirate fleet, he wouldn't be able to launch a counterattack on Bakarov and wouldn't be able to gain enough prestige and capital. The entire plan would lose its original purpose. Tactics were always in service of strategy. If the cart was reversed, then even a glorious victory wouldn't be able to change the overall situation. Angus wasn't too clear about Andre's plan, but he knew that as long as he controlled the wizard tower, he would be in an invincible position. He placed a hand on his chest and bowed. "In that case, please allow me to wish you a safe journey." Andre smiled and waved his hand, walking towards the teleportation gate without looking back. He disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Less than 2 seconds after he left, Angus was like a deflated balloon, slumping to the ground without a care for his image. He muttered to himself, "Phew, damn it, he's a monster. How can a young man who's not even 20 years old have such great strength and terrifying aura?" As a level 9 wizard, he could feel the formless energy ring around Andre more clearly than anyone else in the tower. Even though he didn't know what it was definitely a terrifying power. His defensive magic couldn't resist it at all. Respect. Regardless of whether he admitted it or not, this bald mage from the Gore's kingdom had developed a strong sense of respect for Andre from the bottom of his heart. Perhaps if this continued for a while, the reverence would slowly turn into submission, just like how every powerful mage had countless followers, and he would eventually become one of them. Orire was a world where power reigned supreme. From the commoners and beggars to the nobles and kings, even the gods would look at those with great power in a new light. If an ordinary person poached in the territory of a noble, what awaited him was likely to be chopped off, stomped on, or even hanged. But if a professionist poached, he would only have to pay a small fine. If it were priests, mages, warlocks, druids, and other such casters, they probably wouldn't even have to pay the fine. Moreover, they would even be invited by the nobles and become the guests of honor at the banquets. In this primitive and barbaric society, power was law, power was order, power was class, and power was everything. The starry sky at night was always so beautiful, filling people with endless fanciful thoughts. Coupled with the beautiful scenery of the sea and the pleasant sound of the tide, even the rude and irascible barbarians or dwarves would quietly sit down and enjoy the beauty of nature. But unfortunately, old Bernie wasn't in the mood to enjoy anything. His 2 eyes were fixed on the hourglass hanging on the mast. The sand at the top was only the size of a fingernail, and it wouldn't be long before it all fell down. Waiting for a long time always made people feel inexplicably irritable. A burly man following beside the Rat King finally couldn't bear it and used his fist to fiercely smash the guardrail. He gritted his teeth and cursed. Bastard! It's been so long, and we haven't even seen a shadow. They must be playing with us. Bah! I've said it before, the people outside can't be trusted. They only know how to use us, and after they've used us, they'll throw us away like trash. Another burly man also spat and loudly echoed. From the appearance and body shape of the two, it could be seen that they were related by blood. It was very likely that they were a group of brothers. It was just that when they were growing, all the nutrients were concentrated on their bones and muscles and not their brains. Shut up. Don't be so careless. It's not time yet. Don't let outsiders see us as a joke. Old Bernie, who was also extremely irritable, scolded his subordinates in a low voice. He was very clear that the long period of isolation had caused his tribe to hold an intense hostility towards the outside world. They believed that apart from their brothers and sisters in the tribe, everyone else was a scoundrel and a scoundrel. And this intense hostility was like a cage, isolating the rat men from the ordinary citizens of the city. There wasn't the slightest bit of trust between them. Without a doubt, this wasn't a good sign. Anyone with the slightest bit of intelligence knew that isolation meant opposition, and opposition meant bloodshed and conflict. As a minority of the rat men, if they couldn't integrate into the majority of the people, then sooner or later they would truly become a rat crossing the street that everyone wanted to beat up. Just as old Bernie was beginning to consider whether or not to use the information in his hands to reach a compromise with the underground guild, a slight tremor suddenly appeared on the deck. Following that, a white light appeared out of thin air. From the center of the white light, a person slowly walked out. It was the guest that he had been waiting for a long time. Good evening. I hope I'm not late, because I just happened to be dealing with a very important matter, so I was delayed a bit. I hope you guys didn't wait too long. Andre, who had passed through the magic portal, smiled and bowed, politely greeting them. Although his overly young and handsome face still looked a bit immature, the aura he displayed made the two burly men very nervous, and they both tightly gripped the weapons hanging at their waists. The Rat King glanced at the hourglass hanging on the mast and saw that the last grain of sand had just fallen. The corner of his mouth twitched unnaturally, and he pretended to be careless as he spread out his hands. No, you're not late. The time is just right. May I ask, what is the important matter you're referring to? Of course, no problem. But before that, I think we should first reach an agreement between us. After all, some information needs to be kept secret, and I will only share it with my friends. As he spoke, Andre ignored the hostile gazes of the two men around him and openly sat down across from old Bernie. Chapter 708. Some people said that negotiation was a game of intelligence, while others said that negotiation was a battle of the mind. Regardless of the understanding, it was destined to be filled with mutual deception. Both parties involved in the negotiation had to conceal their thoughts as much as possible. Otherwise, once the other party grasped their weakness, the entire negotiation process would be extremely passive. As a soul that came from the era of information explosion, Andre had already participated in countless business negotiations. He had even studied a few books on psychology. Therefore, with a simple observation of the old man's behavior, expression, and movements, he could easily determine that the other party was putting on an act. His heart was probably filled with anger and anxiety. It was just that he was rather shrewd and didn't immediately act out. Old Bernie obviously didn't know this, as he asked with a ruminating smile, "Oh, then how can I become your friend or ally?" Andre smiled as he shrugged his shoulders. Very simple. First, you have to find a common point of interest. Then, you have to come to an agreement. Finally, you have to join my faction and become a part of my plan. You should be very clear that I have always treated you and your clan in a friendly manner. Moreover, we have a common enemy. As long as we work together, it won't be long before we can completely overthrow the rule of the underground guilds and bring a new order to this chaotic and evil city. Friendly? Ha 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 ha. That's the most ironic joke I've ever heard." Old Bernie suddenly laughed out loud without warning. As he laughed, he gave a look to his subordinate beside him. The latter quickly went into the cabin, and after a while he pulled out a person wrapped in a black cloth bag from head to toe. Old Bernie unceremoniously kicked the person in the bag, his eyes revealing a trace of anger. He immediately stood up and roared loudly. "You actually have the nerve to say the word friendly? Do you know who's inside this box? A little bitch who dares to trick my grandson into attacking the underground guilds. If you can't give me a satisfactory explanation, then I don't mind throwing her into the sea to feed the sharks." His current malevolent expression was like that of an old lion that was continuously baring its teeth at the enemy in order to protect its cub. It looked both dangerous and crazy. However, Andre obviously didn't put this verbal threat in his eyes. He knocked on the almost rotten wooden table and indifferently replied, "Was this a threat? No, this is only a warning. I'm warning you and your people to stay away from my tribe. The real threat is yet to come." As he spoke, Old Bernie waved his hand at the two burly men beside him. The two men immediately rushed forward and tore off the black sack, revealing a dying woman. It was the Catwoman, Mia. She looked like she had been beaten up. There were bruises and whip marks all over her body. Her originally beautiful and charming face was swollen like a piece of bread. Although her clothes and pants were tattered, there were no signs of her being violated. Perhaps it was because she felt the coolness of the sea breeze. Mia slowly woke up from her coma. She forced her eyes open and vaguely recognized Andre's appearance. She immediately begged in a hoarse voice, "Master, I'm very sorry. My plan failed. Please save me. I don't want to die. Don't worry, good girl. You'll be fine, I promise." Andre extended his hand and gently stroked the feline girl's swollen face as he consoled her in a gentle voice. "Promise? Ha ha. I want to know what promise you have. Don't forget, this little bitch is still in my hands. As long as I give the order, she will immediately be thrown into the sea. Don't tell me you want to snatch her away." Old Bernie opened his mouth and laughed loudly in an arrogant manner. Perhaps he felt that he had the absolute advantage, so he finally revealed the wild nature hidden deep in his heart. The kind smile on his face disappeared and was replaced by a ruthless and ferocious expression. "With just you? Oomph." Andre sneered with disdain. He directly took out a level 5 Death Cloud scroll from the scroll box and released it at the sea not far away. A brown poisonous gas spread out in just a few seconds. Wherever it passed, large amounts of fish and prawns floated up and rolled their eyes. At a glance, there were densely packed corpses, making one's scalp tingle. As a classic large-scale killing spell, the Death Cloud spell was far more terrifying than fireballs and lightning, especially the magic energy contained in the poisonous cloud, which was enough to kill creatures with weak vitality in the blink of an eye. They wouldn't even have a chance to resist. If it was combined with grease or spiderweb, it could wipe out an army of hundreds of people at once. It was like a different world's version of chemical weapons. Even a feudal knight would be seriously injured if he breathed in just a little bit. Professionals below level 5 had no chance of surviving at all. The terrifying lethality far exceeded any known poisonous gas on Earth. It would take less than a second to kill an ordinary person. The effect of the Death Cloud spell made Old Bernie's expression instantly freeze. The pupils in his eyes rapidly contracted, enlarged, contracted, and enlarged again. His two hands subconsciously clenched into fists and trembled nonstop. Sweat flowed down from his forehead without stopping. After a full minute, a trace of a bitter smile appeared on his old face. "You win. Let that girl go." One of the brawny men was obviously not convinced. He shouted loudly, "Leader, you don't have to back down. Although the power of the spell is strong, this kid is only one person. I don't believe that he can withstand the siege of so many of us." Besides, before he could finish speaking, Old Bernie immediately jumped up from his chair and fiercely slapped him in the face. He sternly scolded, "Shut up. Let that girl go immediately. This is an order. I'm not dead yet. It's not up to you to give orders." All of the rat men on the boat were stunned. They had never seen their leader lose his temper like this, and they had never seen their leader hit one of their own. Seeing such an interesting scene, Andre slapped the table and laughed loudly. He didn't care about the rat men's murderous gazes and their heavy breathing. He said in a mocking tone, "This is the tribe you're so proud of? A bunch of brainless idiots? You don't need to worry about my people." Old Bernie retorted angrily. Then, he snatched Mia from the hands of the dumbfounded man and pushed her forward. "She's yours." Wise choice. Andre hugged the cat girl and quickly took out a bottle of healing potion from his waist pouch and poured it down her throat. Soon, she let out a slight groan and struggled to stand up. She didn't say a word and waited for her punishment. Chapter 709. In reality, even though Mia's injuries looked serious, they were actually all superficial wounds. Her own internal organs were slightly bleeding. Even without any healing medicine, she would at most be able to recover after lying in bed for 2 days. Aurere's professions, especially close combat professions, had physical fitness and recovery abilities far surpassing those of Earth's professional athletes. Many warriors and knights had their stomachs ripped open by their enemies in fierce battles. In serious cases, their intestines spilled all over the ground. But after the battle ended, as long as they took care of it a little, they would be able to recover after lying in bed for 10 days to half a month. Mia's profession was an assassin. Even though her recovery ability couldn't compare to a warrior or knight, it still wasn't too bad. Add to that the special physique of a word beast, and she wasn't much of a hindrance now. Compared to the wounds on her body, she was more worried about what kind of punishment she would receive if she failed the mission. It must be known that regardless of whether it was Shadownet or Uhtred, they were extremely strict towards failures. Even the lightest punishment would be much worse than the current situation. However, Andre clearly didn't want to punish his own subordinates. This was because he clearly understood that even though Mia could be considered an expert in scheming and infiltrating, she wasn't on the same level as the old and shrewd Rat King. It wouldn't be strange at all for her to slip up and be caught. After a short round of confrontation, the deck sunk into a deathly stillness. It was as if everyone had lost the interest to speak. The situation suddenly became tense and oppressive. The unlucky bastard who had been slapped suffered a huge blow. He lowered his head and stood to the side, sulking. Looking at the large amount of dead fish floating on the surface of the sea, old Bernie faintly sighed. He fished out a dirty piece of parchment from his bosom and directly pushed it forward. "Take a look. I hope you can give me a satisfactory condition after looking at it. Otherwise, I will hand it over to the Underground Guild. I believe that group of badly battered leaders will definitely be willing to tolerate us for a few more decades." Andre took it and gave a glance. He discovered that it was a full list of Shadownet's members. There were no less than 30 of them, and all of them were mid-level leaders. Beside them were even the identities and professions they used to disguise themselves. It was simply more clear than him, the Net Weaver. Old Bernie noticed a flash of surprise in Andre's eyes. He asked in a tired tone, "How is it? Are you scared?" To be honest, I was also shocked when I received this information. I didn't expect a spider like you, who was hiding in the dark, to have quietly weaved a huge net. No wonder you were confident in overthrowing the rule of the pirates and the guilds over the Sardinia Islands. Unfortunately, this net could only display its greatest power when others couldn't see it. Once it was exposed, it would immediately suffer a swift and violent attack from the enemy. I have no intention of being your enemy, but I also don't want to be a pawn that you can use. Ha, scared? No, not at all. Andre threw the parchment in his hand onto the table and shook his head with a smile. My tolerance isn't that bad. Besides, this list has already lost its original value. Even if you give it to the guild leader, you won't be able to salvage anything. As for what you said about not wanting to be a chess piece, I can only say that you are naive. Too naive. The essence of the world is the survival of the fittest. The strong dominate the weak, the nobles dominate the commoners, and the carnivores dominate the herbivores. This is the universal law of nature. Even though some gods of the good camp have always been conveying the concept of justice, equality, and freedom, do you really think that this is possible? They can't even be equal and just themselves. Can a god be equal to a mortal? Obviously not. The life forms of the two are on completely different levels. The former is an immortal who holds terrifying power, while the latter will turn into a pile of dirt in a short 100 years. If you don't want to be a chess piece of someone else, you must first have the power to be a chess player. Otherwise, even if I don't use you, others will. Before I formally state my conditions, let me ask you something. Do you and your tribe have the awareness of being a chess piece? If you do, then let's continue the discussion. If not, then I'm sorry, but the negotiation ends here. I have no need and no obligation to waste time on a group of self-righteous idiots. With that, Andre leaned back in his chair and silently waited for the other party's reply. Perhaps before seizing the Wizard Tower, he would have slightly accommodated the rat men in order to make up for the disadvantage in numbers. But now, whatever these guys could do, the Wizard Tower could do as well. They were like chicken ribs, tasteless, but a pity to throw them away. Old Bernie didn't expect to receive such a tough reply after taking out his trump card. He was completely stunned, because this wasn't a negotiation at all. Instead, it was more like an ultimatum. He didn't take him seriously at all. He tried to find traces of bravado in Andre's eyes and expression, but unfortunately, his right eye that wasn't covered by the blindfold only revealed coldness. A coldness that came from the heart, as if he didn't care about anything around him. As an old man who had experienced too many hardships, old Bernie believed that if he dared to say half a word of no, the poisonous cloud that had just killed countless fishes and prawns would immediately envelop the heads of his tribe. There were no mages among the Ratmen, and they couldn't afford to support mages. However, this didn't mean that they didn't understand the power of mages. During the rebellion several decades ago, it was the members of the secret mage tower who had dealt them a fatal blow. Their terrifying fireballs, lightning bolts, and magic hailstones had killed countless ratmen. Their blood had dyed the sea red, and their corpses had even blocked the drains used for drainage. The power of arcane magic was like a curse that suppressed the ratmen's heads. This was also the reason why they didn't dare to act rashly for decades. After being silent for a long time, old Bernie took a deep breath, as if he had made a decision. He raised his head and asked, "If I'm willing to become a chess piece, what kind of promise can you give me?" The corner of Andre's mouth rose slightly, and he replied with a smile, "A lot. To be exact, a lot. I can guarantee that as long as the Ratmen follow my rules and laws, they can live under the sun like normal people. They can do whatever they want without having to hide or worry about the safety of their family. Of course, there's no free lunch in this world. If you want to get something, you have to pay a price. I believe you understand this. Can you tell me what the price is?" Old Bernie's eyes widened as he continued to ask. Andre stood up and put his mouth next to the old man's ear. With a voice that only the two of them could hear, he said, "The price is death. You and your loyal subordinates must all disappear after this turmoil ends. The future, I promised, will only be left for the young." Chapter 710. Old Bernie wasn't afraid of death. In this world where the average lifespan was less than 35 years old, he was already considered a rare old man. The only thing he was worried about was the tribe that he had built and developed. To him, living wasn't for enjoyment, nor was it for power. It was a responsibility, a very heavy responsibility that made it hard for him to breathe. For so many years, just feeding those hungry mouths was enough to make him worry. In addition, the underground guild was pressuring him step by step. Living was almost equivalent to suffering. Now that he suddenly heard that someone wanted to take his life, he was not angry at all. Instead, he laughed out loud happily. "Ha ha ha ha. Interesting, this is really interesting. Do you know? I've been waiting for this sentence for more than 20 years. Today I finally got it. No problem. I'm willing to bear this price. But before that, you have to let me see your trump card. You should know that I can only stand on the side of the winner." Of course, a very reasonable request. But I have a lot of trump cards. Which one do you want to see? Andre also laughed and joked. He could feel that the old man in front of him wasn't joking. He really didn't care about death. He didn't hesitate at all, just like the famous bard Flamel Kingfisher described in his poem. Death was never the end, but the beginning of another great adventure. A true warrior would never fear death. When death came, they would gladly accept it and not try to escape. In fact, because of the existence of faith in the gods, the people of Oriar had a tendency of two extremes in their view of death. Some of the people who lived in relatively superior living conditions often tried to live longer so that they could enjoy everything in the material world as much as possible. Most of them were either nobles, rich merchants, or senior professionals. Their attitude towards the gods was also reverence, avoiding worship. On the contrary, some people who lived at the bottom of society didn't have any attachment to the material world. They put everything they had on faith, hoping that after death, they could live a happy life in the kingdom of the gods. So, the more painful it was, the more they didn't fear death. They even saw death as a kind of relief. It was clear that Old Bernie was one of the latter. He waved his hand at his subordinates, indicating for them to leave. Not long after, there were only 3 people left on the deck of the boat. Him, Andre, and the silent Mia. With a self-deprecating laugh, Old Bernie was the first to break the silence. He pointed at the sea of dead fish and asked, "I want to know, how many spells like this can you release? Are you talking about the 5th level spell, Cloud of Death?" Andre furrowed his brows in confusion. He didn't understand why the other party was asking this. Was he trying to figure out his level? Death Cloud spell. It turned out that this name really lived up to its name. That's right, that's what I'm talking about. Old Bernie nodded without thinking. Death Cloud is a level 5 spell. Only mages of the 9th rank and above can learn and cast it. As you can see, its large-scale lethality is unparalleled. With my own strength, I can only release 2 at most. However, a mage's power doesn't completely come from their own bodies, but rather from their wisdom and knowledge. If I don't care about the cost, I can absolutely cover half of Valen City with the Cloud of Death. I don't know if this answer satisfies you. In order to let an old man who had never systematically come into contact with magic understand the power he possessed, Andre gave a more detailed explanation. This was because he was very clear that even though a mage's true strength wasn't in their ability to kill, in the eyes of many ordinary people, the most powerful and frightening part of a mage was their spells that could occasionally kill people. Half of the city? Old Bernie instantly jumped up from his chair when he heard this description. He exclaimed in disbelief, How is this possible? Don't tell me you can kill all your enemies in one go." Looking at the shocked expression on the old man's face, Andre smiled and shrugged as he explained, "More or less. I've just seized the wizard tower hidden under the city earlier today, and I've also killed Gerald Jenkinson while I was at it. Perhaps you still don't understand what this means, so let me explain a little. You can think of a mage as a basin of water. Every time you release a spell, you need to consume a portion of the water from the basin. The higher the mage's level, the more water there will be in the basin. In the end, it might even become a wooden bucket or a water tank. But a mage tower is different. It's like a well, a river, or even a lake. It constantly absorbs the surrounding energy to replenish itself. Once a mage has a mage tower, it means that they can continuously add water to their basin. As long as the mage tower's energy isn't exhausted, the mage can release spells without limit. Old Bernie obviously knew of the existence of the hidden mage tower and was also very clear of the mage tower's power. He muttered to himself with a trembling voice, "Oh my God, since you've already grasped such great power, why do you still want to negotiate, right?" Before he could finish speaking, Andre added the second half of the sentence. "Yes, why don't you just get rid of the Underground Guild? I believe that with the Mage Tower's power, it shouldn't be too hard to kill a bunch of guys who don't even have a spellcaster, right?" As he spoke, a trace of doubt appeared in old Bernie's eyes. My dear friend, you have to understand that pure slaughter can't solve all problems. What I want is order. I want Valen City and even the entire Sardinia Islands to be completely taken over. In particular, There can't be any mishaps with the pirates' enormous fleet. In order to achieve this goal, I'm willing to compromise and share the fruits of victory with my allies. Perhaps you'll think I'm lying if I say this, so let's see for ourselves. After he finished speaking, Andre smiled as he pointed in the direction of the city and directly sent an order to Angus through the secret imprint. A few short seconds later, a dazzling white lightning suddenly shot out from the center of the city, streaking across the night sky and disappearing into the clouds in the blink of an eye. Although it had only been a few seconds since the lightning spell was launched and disappeared, Old Bernie knew that this meant that the young man in front of him had truly taken control of the Mage Tower and the most powerful force in the surrounding islands. He forcefully suppressed the shock in his heart and raised his head, saying very seriously, "I've already seen your trump card. It's very powerful, so powerful that it's beyond my imagination. Now, please give me a promise. Promise that the Rat Man can live a normal life. For this, I'm willing to give up everything I have. As long as you give the order, I won't hesitate to commit suicide." Chapter 711. I swear in the name of Alpha that as long as you do as I ask, I will guarantee that the Rat Men will be able to live like normal people after seizing control of this area. They will not be persecuted or harassed in any way. Without any hesitation or word games, Andre solemnly swore. Although from the perspective of a leader, he had to get rid of all unstable elements, especially those who had a strong appeal, but this didn't affect his respect for the old man in front of him. The spirit of sacrifice was one of the greatest and most noble sentiments of mankind. It not only required great courage, but also a selfless heart. Without a doubt, Old Bernie was selfless toward his own tribe. After controlling the docks for so many years, he didn't have any personal property. Every copper he earned was used to buy daily necessities, improving the poverty and backwardness of his tribe. It was because of this that he won the unconditional trust, respect, and absolute obedience of the Rat Men. But unfortunately, this great personal prestige became a noose around his neck. No matter who became the supreme ruler of this archipelago, he had a reason to die. The reason was very simple. Any person or idea that went against the ruling class would be ruthlessly erased in the end, no matter if it was correct, advanced, noble, kind, or a hero. Similar things happened too many times in the history of Earth. For example, after St. Joan of Arc defeated the invaders and defended her homeland, she was ruthlessly betrayed by the nobles and burned alive. Because of her series of glorious victories, not only did she violate the nobles' right to control the army, but even the king felt a great threat. Many commoners only knew St. Joan of Arc and didn't know King Charles VII, so the betrayal and death that happened later wasn't worth making a fuss about. Old Bernie's situation was similar. Unless he died, the Rat Men wouldn't accept a second person as their leader. He was clearly aware of this point, so he gladly accepted using his own life in exchange for the continuation of his tribe. The bright moonlight and stars intertwined in the night sky, full of shocking beauty. On Earth, there would be no stars if there were a bright moon, and there would be no bright moon if there were stars. On Orion, the moon and stars represented God. Perhaps there was a difference in strength, but they were all equal in status. Therefore, unless it was a cloudy day, the moon would always hang in the night sky with the stars. After getting the promise he wanted, Old Bernie raised his head and stared at the sky for a long time. He then smiled at Andre and said, "You know what? Actually, I didn't want to live anymore. For more than 20 years, I've been hiding underground without seeing the light of day, accompanied by conspiracies and darkness. That feeling was terrible. If it weren't for the responsibility, I would have chosen to commit suicide to end the pain." Understandable. In a dark space, without any reference, people tended to have a wrong perception of time. Some people felt like a year had passed in a minute, while others felt like a year had passed in a minute. Perhaps when the Underground Guild asked you to stay underground without seeing the light of day, they wanted to use this method to torture you, to make your mind and reason completely collapse. If I may, I want to ask how you've endured all these years. You should know that anyone who has been locked up in prison for more than 20 years would more or less have some signs of collapse. But you've been as calm as ever. As someone who had been forced to live in fear underground for several months, Andre was very clear on how terrible it was to lose the concept of time. Let alone 20 years. Even half a year was enough to drive a normal person crazy. No, you're wrong. I actually went crazy the second year after I entered the underground. I went completely crazy, abandoning my human identity and thoughts. I was like a rat, constantly digging holes. The underground cave you see is something I used 20 years to dig out bit by bit with my claws. As you can see, I'm a word beast. The wildness of a beast and the rationality of a human coexist harmoniously in my body. As I dug for longer and longer, I gradually found that my human side began to awaken in my body. Not long after, my rationality and calmness returned to my brain. From then on, whenever my rationality was about to collapse, I would take the initiative to release my beast nature. After the release of my beast nature, my rationality would continue to be maintained for a period of time. Interesting, isn't it? Ha ha! As he spoke, old Bernie slapped the table and laughed. He laughed so happily that even tears flowed out. After laughing, he wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes and quickly put on a serious expression and said, "Okay, let's stop chatting. You should know that the Underground Guild is still launching attacks. I can't leave for too long. Tell me, what do you need us to do?" Very simple. First, fight an evenly matched battle with the Underground Guild. Attract all their attention. At least before the pirate fleet returns, don't let them discover my existence. Andre didn't even think and directly stated his request. He didn't need the Rat Man to risk his life. He just needed to maintain the status quo. Stall for time? How long will it take? Old Bernie frowned and asked. Andre thought for a few seconds and immediately replied, "At the latest, it won't take more than 2 weeks. I'll let some of my subordinates nibble at the Underground Guild from the inside. At the same time, I'll cause chaos and destruction in other places. In short, you don't have to worry about them launching an all-out attack. If necessary, I can also provide some magic assistance." As for the issue of weapons and armor, I think since you've already captured Mia, you must have gotten the equipment in Patty's hands. It should be enough for a short period of time. Old Bernie nodded thoughtfully. No problem. When I return, I'll mobilize all the old fellows and launch a small-scale counterattack. At the same time, I'll expand the front line to the entire lower city. When that time comes, no matter how hard the guild tries, they won't be able to restore order in a short period of time. Very good idea. But remember, don't let your people spread the disease. I don't want to suddenly find the situation completely out of control on the night of the full moon. Andre was very clear about the destructive power of the Rat Man, so he had to remind him. Hee, don't worry. I don't need to bite anyone this time. Moreover, I'll follow your request and let the older generation die in the war. Only those young ladies and boys will be left. When he said these words, old Bernie was still smiling. There wasn't a trace of sadness in his expression. It seemed that to him, using the sacrifice of the older generation in exchange for the future of the entire tribe was a very good deal. At least it was 100 times better than the half-dead state they were in now. Chapter 712. Thank you very much for your cooperation. You know, this is the first time I've sat down with someone I want to get rid of to discuss matters of cooperation. I have to say, this feeling is truly wonderful. It's as if we clearly have different standpoints, but we can communicate and understand each other like true friends. Andre said as he stood up and extended his right hand. Although the two of them still hadn't clarified their subordinate relationship, for smart people like them, there were some things that didn't need to be said too clearly. It was enough to know what was going on in their hearts. Old Bernie also stood up and extended his right hand to shake. He sighed with a smile. Yes, this is truly wonderful. This is also the first time I've sat down and chatted with someone who wants to take my life. I even have the urge to confide in him. You're more complicated than anyone I've seen in my life. Whether it's your thoughts or your way of doing things, you're full of contradictions. You don't seem like a young man at all. May I ask, What you plan to do after seizing control of the Sardinia? Become the new pirate king? Or use this as a base to infiltrate all the port cities in the south? According to my investigation, the organization you belong to doesn't seem to care much about money. Many times, in order to achieve their goals, they don't hesitate to use rich benefits to tempt the enemy to make a new choice. Maybe it's because of my humble background, or maybe it's because my vision isn't broad enough. In short, this kind of behavior is very puzzling. Since it's not for profit, why spend so much effort to infiltrate an area and try to control everything in secret? Andre couldn't help but smile and shake his head at the old man's series of questions. I'm sorry, dear friend. I'm afraid I can't answer everything about the organization, because even I don't know what the purpose of the people behind it is. But one thing is very clear. They have enough power to destroy everything. Apart from the gods, no one can stop them. As for seizing control of the Sardinia, that's my personal will. The reason is very simple. I hate the barbaric and chaotic way of doing things. I plan to improve the way of robbery and teach them how to obtain wealth in a way that everyone can accept. Of course, the most important thing is that I'm playing a dangerous game with a troublesome opponent. I plan to use this unique geographical location to hide a surprise army in case of emergency. A dangerous game? With who? Relying on his rich life experience, old Bernie instantly grasped the main point. He squinted his eyes and carefully probed. I'm sorry, but this matter has nothing to do with you. Furthermore, it's beyond the limits of your understanding, so it's better if you don't know. At this point, Andre paused for a moment. An extremely complicated look appeared in his eyes, followed by a self-deprecating smile. Hee. You might not believe me if I tell you. In fact, I'm no different from you. We're both chess pieces in someone else's hands. It's just that the person who controls me is a real chess player, and you're just a chess piece in the chess piece's hands. In this dangerous world, being weak is a sin. If you can't be manipulated by others, then do your best to become stronger. When you suddenly find that there are no enemies around you that can threaten you, you will naturally become a chess player. Old Bernie smiled bitterly and shook his head. All right, I won't ask. This is indeed beyond the scope of my understanding. It's really hard to believe that even a person like you is someone else's chess piece. Then what reason do I have to resist? A wise choice. Because if I reveal some information that I shouldn't reveal, then you and your clan will very likely all die within half an hour. Please don't think of this as a threat. Please treat it as advice between friends. Goodbye. Saying this, Andre slightly bowed, pulled Mia up, and turned to leave. Hey, where are you going? We're at sea right now. If you want to get off the ship, you should at least wait until we reach the shore. Old Bernie loudly reminded. No need. I'm a mage. Solving this little problem isn't a problem. Oh, right, when you attack the underground guild, be careful. There's a woman called Maris who I set up as a spy. Don't be careful and accidentally kill her. As the last word left his mouth, a white light suddenly descended from the sky, enveloping Andre and Mia. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared from the deck. Old Bernie looked on helplessly as the two living people mysteriously left. He took a deep breath and muttered to himself, Is it the power of magic again? Looks like I really don't have much of a choice this time. But this is fine too. Since I'm about to enter my coffin, I might as well go all out. I hope these old bones of mine can still hold on. Just as the Rat King made up his mind, Andre and Mia had already teleported to a dark alley in the lower city. This place had obviously been abandoned by the Underground Guild. The thick smell of blood could be smelled everywhere. In the corner of the alley, a few meters away, 3 rotting corpses were emitting the stench of rotting corpses. Many flies were buzzing around them. The houses on both sides of the road were all nailed shut with wooden planks. Several pairs of eyes, filled with malice, were carefully peeking out from the gaps. Mia vigilantly observed the surroundings and quickly suggested in a low voice, Master, this place is very dangerous. We have to leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, we might encounter trouble. Let's go to the hiding place of Portia and the others. I have some things to tell them. Andre knew that this place wasn't suitable for conversation. He immediately told them where he wanted to go. No problem. Please follow closely behind me." With that, Mia stood on her tiptoes and quickly moved toward the west side of the city. She had used some kind of special technique. She was clearly walking, but Andre had to jog to keep up. The two of them shuttled through the secluded alleys one after another, trying their best to avoid the gang members who were fighting for territory. After a full 10 minutes, they finally arrived at a small wooden two-story building. Mia very carefully checked for footprints around the building. After confirming that there were no signs of strangers approaching, she immediately took out a piece of metal wire from the gap between the windows. She then used the metal wire to gently lift the latch on the inside of the door. Her movements were so gentle, as if she was afraid of startling something. Andre was just about to open his mouth to ask when he suddenly heard a buzzing sound coming from within the door. In the blink of an eye, a cold light shot out from the gap above the door and nailed itself to the ground less than a centimeter away from Mia. Chapter 7:13. It was a crossbow arrow the length of a finger. Although the arrowhead had been inserted into the wooden plank, the shaft was a strange dark green. Anyone who wasn't a fool would be able to tell that it was smeared with Antire's poison. Once the skin was pierced, it wouldn't take long for the victim to die painfully. There was no doubt that this was a trap used to prevent the enemy from invading. If one didn't know in advance, the possibility of avoiding it by reflex was very small. Just when Andre thought that it was safe, Mia suddenly stood up and threw herself to the side without saying a word. Her whole body was spread out on the ground. Whoosh! Whoosh! 2 more crossbow arrows were shot from the inside of the door that had just been pushed open and from the eaves of the house next to it. Their positions were very sinister, one in front and one on the left. Together with the previous arrow that was shot from above, they completely sealed off all escape routes, leaving no way for the intruder to survive. However, Mia obviously knew the positions of all the arrows and dodged them appropriately. She then got up from the ground and quickly rushed into the house. She lifted a dusty carpet and opened the lid to the basement. "Master, this is one of my safe houses. Please go in first. I still have to put the arrows back in place." Andre nodded approvingly. "Good trapping technique. First use the first arrow to force the enemy to dodge to the sides. Then use the crossbow method to kill the enemy in one shot. Unless the intruder is carrying a shield, the possibility of survival is basically zero. Thank you for your praise. This is all thanks to Uhtred's strict training. Although I hate him very much, I have to say that he laid a good foundation for me. It was that training that allowed me to survive danger after danger." Mia's feelings towards Uhtred were quite complicated. There was both gratitude and hatred, but all of this had become a thing of the past with Uhtred's death, leaving only some trivial memories. Perhaps when she was older, she would be able to straighten out these complicated feelings and give a fair judgment to this person who had helped her and almost destroyed her. Andre didn't like to pry into other people's hearts, so he smiled and immediately went into the musty underground passage. Not long after, he heard the halfling's furious curses. "Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! I can't take it anymore. When would these days without day and night come to an end? I'd rather rush out and fight the enemy than sit here and do nothing. Portia, stop messing around. It's not like you don't know how chaotic the outside world is right now. With just a few of us, we won't be able to do anything. Just obediently hide for a few days." The voice obviously belonged to Fiona. She was trying to stop her bored best friend from going out and causing trouble. Halflings were known for being restless. It was an extravagant hope for them to stay quiet for 3 minutes, not to mention hiding in a dark cellar. "I don't care. If he continued to stay here, he would be driven crazy. What's more, no one has come to deliver news for such a long time. Who knows what has happened outside? Maybe that guy needs our help." For the sake of leaving this place, Portia had gone all out. Not only had she tried to find excuses for herself, but she had also tried to bewitch others. As one of the few liars in the room with a higher IQ, Jace instantly saw through the halfling's lies and mocked. "He needs our help? Huh, I'm afraid there's no funnier joke in the world than this." Have you forgotten how he turned the whole street into a sea of fire not long ago? And how he slaughtered the guild's owl squad and scrupulously? Believe me, if even he has fallen to the point where he needs help, then we'd better run away quickly. Otherwise, we'll only be a hindrance. Roar, roar. The Black Panthers seemed to agree with this point of view and let out 2 low growls. Bullshit. Are you 2 itching for a beating again? Especially you, a big black silly cat. What do you know? If you bark again, I'll cut off your food. Angered out of humiliation, Portia immediately pointed her spear at Black Panther. Ever since the last battle, the 2 of them had become enemies. Whenever there was an opportunity, they would go tit for tat. Although they did not speak the same language, they could miraculously understand each other. They were simply natural enemies. Seeing that the woman and the panther were about to fight, Mabel quickly stood up and stopped them. Okay, let's stop here. For hours ago, you guys knocked over a bucket of water. If you knock over another bucket, we won't have any water to drink. Hearing such a lively conversation inside, Andre couldn't help but smile and shake his head. He pushed open the door and stepped in. But the moment he stepped into the dark cellar, a black shadow suddenly pounced on him and licked him fiercely without saying a word. Upon closer look, it turned out to be a black panther. After all, as an animal, its hearing, smell, and vision were much stronger than humans. Even in a pitch-black situation, it could easily recognize people that it had seen before. Hee hee, looks like you guys are doing well. You actually have the energy to quarrel. You know, I haven't rested for 2 days and 2 nights. And in the middle, I've experienced a fierce magic duel and a thrilling assassination. Now, I'm so sleepy that I can't even open my eyes. As Andre spoke, he pushed the Black Panther's head away and sat down on a shabby chair and yawned. To be honest, he was really tired, especially with the detection function of his left eye. Every time he used it, it would consume a lot of energy. Now that he was done with everything, he fell into a state of exhaustion. Oh God, you finally appeared. Tell me, what happened after we left? Those 2 mages didn't do anything to you, did they? The quick-witted Bosha was the first to run over and look around. Her eyes revealed a strong curiosity. It could be seen that she was a little bored and desperately wanted to hear something interesting to relieve the boredom in her heart. Andre smiled and shrugged his shoulders as he replied, "Nothing much. Just like I mentioned earlier, we had a fierce magic duel. I killed one of them, and the other one became my subordinate. I have to say, they were quite difficult opponents. I was slightly careless and suffered a big loss. Fortunately, you guys weren't there, otherwise you would have been affected. 1 against 2? Wow, well done." Bosha jumped up and shouted excitedly. She couldn't wait to ask, "Describe to me how you did it. I've never seen a magic duel in my life." About the magic duel, hold on. I'm not here to tell you a story. I'm here to give you some tasks. As he spoke, Andre gestured to Mia, who had just entered the passage, indicating for her to guard the door. Chapter 714. Mission? What mission? Tell me quickly. As long as I don't have to stay in this damned place, I'll agree to anything without hesitation. Portia waved her little fists and promised solemnly. However, it was a pity that no one believed her promise because all the residents of Orire knew that halflings were best at lying and bragging other than stealing. If they believed their promise, they might as well believe that pigs could climb trees. In comparison, Jays was very calm. When he heard the word mission, his first reaction was to be vigilant. He immediately asked, "Are you sure this includes me? Although I've learned a little swordsmanship, I'm still far from them. I'm afraid I won't be of much help." "No, my dear Mr. Swindler, you're the irreplaceable core of this mission. They're only there to assist you." Andre glanced at Jays and said meaningfully, "I'm the core? Are you mistaken?" Jays was so frightened that his face turned pale. He subconsciously wanted to turn around and escape. However, when he recalled that Mia was guarding the only exit, he quickly dismissed the idea. He smiled bitterly and muttered to himself, "Great God of deceit, quickly come and save your believers. Otherwise, I'm going to die, huh? Don't worry, I won't let you commit murder or arson." Instead, I plan to use your outstanding professionalism to negotiate with the leaders of the subordinate guilds and force them to choose a new faction. Of course, in order to achieve this goal, I'll equip you with some helpers. For example, a thief who can easily sneak into someone's bedroom and leave a threatening note. Another example is a warrior who has brute strength and can easily snap an adult's neck. In short, I'll equip you with a team that can destroy more than 50 guilds. What you need to do is to bring them to comb through the entire lower city and eliminate all the stubborn fellows. As for the scale, you can decide on your own. Anyway, I want to see the lower city clean within a week. After saying that, the corners of Andre's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a smile that made people shudder. His idea was very simple, and that was to completely limit the influence of the underground guilds to the upper city. This way, it would not excessively provoke the pirates who stayed in the castle and could also isolate them from the coastline. Then, he would set up an inescapable net near the port. When the pirate King Francis returned with his fleet, he believed that at that time, the expression on the other party's face would be very interesting. Jess noticed the flash of cold light in Andre's right eye. He couldn't help but shiver as he stuttered. Crazy. This is crazy. Are you sure you want to do this? The leaders of the underground guilds would definitely not sit back and do nothing. They would use the cruelest means to take revenge. We will. That's enough. Andre waved his hand and interrupted the swindler with a sneer. There is no need to worry about this at all, because they will soon be too busy to fend for themselves. Can't even take care of myself? What do you mean? Portia keenly sensed that something was wrong and hurriedly jumped onto the table to ask. It's simple. I just reached an agreement with old Bernie half an hour ago. Now, the Ratmen are our allies. They promised me that it won't be long before they expand the war to the entire lower city. When that time comes, chaos and slaughter will fill the streets and alleys. No one will notice your existence at all. Speaking to this point, Andre shifted his gaze to Jess and used a playful tone to entice him. How about it? Do you want to taste the taste of power? Just a word, a look, and those usually arrogant and despotic fellows will crawl at your feet and tremble. You must know that normally, I wouldn't easily give this kind of power to others. But recently, I just happen to have more important things to deal with. This opportunity is hard to come by. A scholar once said that power is the most addictive poison in the world. Especially for men, it is simply irresistible. Jess's breathing became hurried within a short few seconds after he blurted out those words. His two eyes released a greedy light. Hesitation, struggle. His heart at this moment was like a drop of water falling into a boiling pot of oil. It kept boiling and rolling. His brain was uncontrollably imagining himself holding power in his hands. After a full minute, he licked his dry lips and sighed. You're really a demon who bewitches people's hearts. Well, I agreed to take this mission. But there's a premise. You have to tell me, other than these people around me, who are the rest of the helpers? Clap, 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 clap. Great. I knew that an ambitious man like you would never refuse power. Believe me, you won't regret the choice you made today, because it means a new start in life. Andre clapped his hands as he spoke. Then, he took out a piece of parchment that he had prepared beforehand. Here, this is the transfer order of the Carmiel mercenary group. From now on, they will completely obey your orders. Jess took the parchment with trembling hands and quickly opened it to take a look at the contents. His face was instantly filled with surprise. Then he put one hand on his chest and bowed deeply. I swear that I will complete this mission perfectly and will not let you down. Very good. Then I'm looking forward to your performance. Remember, this is a test. If you can pass it smoothly, then in the near future, I will provide you with a broader stage. Work hard, Andre said while patting the swindler's head gently to encourage him. In a chaotic situation, a person's vision and ability to adapt were the most important tests. He wanted to use this opportunity to see if the swindler was the talent he expected. Everyone present seemed to be in disbelief that Andre would give such an important mission to a swindler. They were all stunned. The only one who was not affected was Jennifer. She obviously didn't care about these scheming things. She took 2 steps forward and handed over the poetry book full of annotations with both hands. She said with a smile, "Minter, I have deciphered the things you asked for. Please take a look." "So fast?" Andre asked with a little surprise. Jennifer nodded gently and replied, "I promised that I would be able to decipher this manuscript in at most 3 days. If it wasn't interrupted at the critical moment, it would have been completed long ago." After flipping through a few pages, Andre's face showed a satisfied smile. "Not bad. The annotations are very detailed. Even a layman like me can understand it." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.